All right, everybody, we're here to go through our Pokemon Warpath reviews. We didn't get as many reviews as on the first chapter, but honestly, I've kind of learned to expect that. For whatever reason, the first chapter gets a lot of reviews, but then it kind of falls off for a little bit after that. But yeah, we'll go ahead and address the ones that we do have. We're beginning with Joe Clone here.
All right, already I am shipping Keihatsu and Oichi. Their interaction at dinner was so relatable for me and awkward at times, and I just couldn't help but want them to spend more time together. That's aside from the knowledge that the game already will have them together.
The game doesn't really, at least to my understanding of it, and I've played it fairly recently, there's not really anything romantic between the hero and Oichi.
It's implied.
No, because it's not. It really is. Okay. She stays with you throughout the journey, but there's no romantic subtext to be had there.
Okay.
I don't think. It's just a personal choice of mine.
Okay. The backstory of Keihatsu's dad and his many mistresses, wow, you really went there, was incredibly surreal simply because I know you've never done anything like that before.
No, I have not.
If there's going to be more from that period of his life, I hope for a more positive look back. For some reason, I feel like I want something akin to Zuko memories with his mom, but that could just be that could just be the Avatar connection we made earlier.
I mean, you'll have to wait and see.
Deadwood, everything changed when the mouth is suddenly slapped shut.
Shut up! It's been overdone!
Anyway, the way you handled his attitude with his advisors was also really smart, and it surprised me again. It's cool to have a character that knows how to handle disrespect in a very firm manner without losing his temper. I was thoroughly impressed. Can't wait for more of that.
It's very challenging for me on a personal level to handle conflict in this manner.
That's where I'm calling it for this chapter. Oichi's reason for staying is a bit morbid, but kind of humorous. I'll be there for the next time when the battle will begin.
Yeah, we're about to be heading into the fight here.
All right. Light Hero Kaiser. Most interesting. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Glow Clone. I can't talk today. Sorry, Joe Clone. But thank you. Light Hero Kaiser. Most interesting, great chapter mate. Can't wait for more. Has a shiny Umbreon on his shoulder. Oh.
That's kind of what I'm leaning towards making the shiny Eevee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
Yeah. He'll get more Pokemon, but just aesthetically, I kind of like the Umbreon. And so honestly, right now it's a toss up between Umbreon and Espeon because both of them evolve. It just depends. So Espeon, it's you evolve it during the daytime. Umbreon is during the nighttime, but they both evolve due to high friendship. So you have this very we've established a pretty close connection with Keihatsu and Eevee. So to me, that's kind of I'm leaning towards that because that just makes the most sense thematically for me. And I'm leaning toward the Umbreon, but we'll see.
Cool. Well, just because Umbreons are so cool.
Yeah.
So, Jin, you seriously have your Pokemon out?
Yes, it makes sense anyway. This is Moonlight.
I have to ask, why me?
To annoy Kaito.
Blade Hero Light and Shadow Monarch signing out.
Shadow Monarch.
Nice. All right. Light Hero Kaiser.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Silly Kita. Cute ship is cute. I see that we're still in the phase of introducing our main characters, but in this one you take further a facet that you touched on somewhat superficially in the first chapter. I believe it was J.K. Rowling who said, if you want to know the measure of a character, don't look at how he treats his equals, but at those who are beneath him. Or something to that effect.
Interesting.
I might also be wrong about the source of the quote, but you get the idea.
I mean, yeah, that's a
good quote. Yeah,
that's a good quote. There's okay, I didn't know about that quote, but
that's really good.
Yeah, this I certainly share the sentiment.
We'll have to Google where that one comes from and see if it was Rowling or not. It sounds like something she would say. Last chapter, we saw Keihatsu mostly interacting with people who are socially beneath him, but still hold some amount of influence in his court. In this one, we get to see him interacting with his household staff, which in terms of the social ladder are pretty far down on the bottom rungs. Despite that, he still seems to treat them well, if not with respect, which is another point to illustrate that kind of person / ruler he is.
Yeah. again, like I absolutely agree with the sentiment. Like if you don't, it's like if you want to know the measure of a person, look at how they treat their inferiors. For I'm para quoting. I hadn't heard it put into that many words, but yeah, I kind of wanted to. Yeah, I'm very used to dealing with characters who are among equals, or if they are around, or in some of the cases, like if they're around people that they view like socially or that they view as inferior, they're generally pretty rude to them. Like so some of my characters definitely have a superiority complex.
Oh, definitely.
So this is my attempt at making like the humble king kind of thing.
His reaction to the mention of Zekrom was also very well done to show us how people in this world regard the mythical Pokemon without it feeling sudden or out of place in the conversation. I was wondering if the legendary Pokemon would be making any sort of appearance, but if so, how often they would show up. I feel like a lot of fan fiction writers use those beings a little too liberally because they want their characters to make use of them, just because they look cool or because they want their characters to hand the power of a minor deity at their fingertips. You seem to be taking the approach of treating the legendary Pokemon with the proper contextual respect that would make people behold them as such fearsome beings worthy of their myths. It makes me excited to know how our heroes will handle such power when they come to face it, as I have no doubt that they will in the long run.
Yeah. So yeah, Zekrom being in the game, in this story, had to be a no-brainer. It's like in the game, that's one of the Pokemon on the cover art. Like that's one of the reasons why everybody fears Nobunaga the way that they do, is because he basically has this minor deity of lightning on his side. And like you said, like contextually speaking, I wanted to kind of step into the shoes of everybody who's like, yeah, that's to us that would be like, oh wow, Hercules is a real guy, and now he's walking around tossing out justice and that'd be kind of terrifying.
Yeah, well, and more like now this specific political figure has him in his pocket or something, or is trying to.
Yeah, or like more likely someone out of DC like made a deal with Hades and now has Cerberus on a leash.
That's a little more. I didn't just say that. Anyway, a thought that just occurred to me that you've taken a rather Avatar: Last Airbender, a cartoon version, of course, approach
you
to
have
the
to make
establishment.
that distinction now.
You do, to the establishment of the big bad. Yes, we have the Fire Nation moving into attack, but even further down the line, we have Dragnor and Nobunaga, which, much like how in the book Water, we had the overarching threat of Ozai and the Fire Nation as a whole, but the immediate antagonist was Zhao. Yep. It was a very interesting blending of the immediate urgency and the slow build toward the ultimate threat that I can look forward to seeing unfold.
Yeah.
Nice.
I definitely well, you guys, if you've been watching this channel for any length of time, I love the Last Airbender.
Yeah, we're huge
fans
of the original.
while I was planning this story, like it does this, it already does this in the game, but I really wanted to like kind of capture that feeling of like, it's like, yes, we have this threat in front of us, but you always want to have that bigger one in the back of your mind, because like I said, like Zhao's the big problem in the first book, and then in the second book you have Azula and the Dai Li. And then in the third book, you've got, Ozai's pulling the strings the whole time in the back. But it's not until the third season that you finally get to see him. Yeah. You finally come face to face with him. And to me, Ozai's a great example of an evil character who is just evil just because he's evil. It's like, it can be done. Like, there's a lot of literature and cinematics that go into, we have to lend context to the villain. And again, this can be done well. But I feel like it's becoming such an overdone thing in Western media these days. And I would say that this is also a fault of Eastern media, where they have this tendency to like want you to almost over empathize or sympathize with the villain. And like there's just some people who are just straight up evil. And they they don't have to
have a reason.
There was, so you're probably gonna roll your eyes at this, but in Psych, the show, one of the main villains, like he's kind of operating in the background for a bit, and then when you finally get to him, Sean's like, so what? It's like, so what's your story? Did mommy not love you not love you enough when you were a kid or whatever? And the guy's like, no, he's like, no, I could have gone either way. I chose to indulge the crazies. And it's just it's as simple as that. Dang. But it's done in a way where I'm like, yeah, I could see it.
Yeah.
So like I enjoy that kind of villain. Like, I don't know if that's just my personal niche or if it's a result of the oversaturation of sympathetic villains in current media, but that kind of thing like speaks out to me. Because again, there are people who are just evil. And there doesn't really need to be any greater reasoning behind that.
All right. Damn, Keihatsu might take the record for most screwed up childhood out of your original characters. Maybe I'm just saying that because I didn't expect that kind of background to come from one of your works with all the debauchery from his father. But it genuinely took me by surprise.
I love that that's the thing everybody's fixating on for this chapter.
And to the power dynamics of his new position, it definitely makes sense to me why he would latch onto Oichi the way that he has. Mataris. Trauma triggered. Gorin, familial obligations, triggered. Kudai, societal expectations, triggered. Keihatsu, familial obligations, societal expectations, trauma, ha 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 ha, politics, go brrr. Okay. That bit where he feels like he only just laid down to sleep and then is getting woken up was relatable on a borderline uncomfortable level for me. I'd like to blame my lack of a normal sleeping schedule on anything but myself, like Keihatsu. But like Keihatsu, I am the only one at fault for not being asleep by 10 p.m.
Politics go brr.
Moving on, his confrontation with the advisors was interesting to watch, as again he handled things a lot differently than I've come to expect from your characters. There were no direct bodily threats made, which is what I feel like your characters tend to default to. Granted, they usually have the power to back their threats, but Keihatsu was much more subdued in the rebuttal of his advisors' protests.
Yeah, this is an example of a character who has been given a lot of power, but has been raised with the correct mentality on how to use it.
He's got the self-control.
Yes. Like, even though, his mom left early, not by her choice, his dad was hardly involved in his life, but you can see that he's had, like, he talks about his tutors, and I'll get more into that as the story goes on, but like, just from the way that he acts, you can see that not only is this in his nature, but he would have had to have been trained to handle things this way.
He's almost like a reverse Prince Caspian in a way.
How so?
Because Caspian was mostly raised by tutors. I mean, he didn't have his parents, but it's like he was raised by his uncle. He didn't really like his uncle's methods, but he didn't really know how he felt about him one way or the other. And the uncle treated him okay at a distance. He didn't really have much of a relationship with him until his uncle, and the only difference is the uncle, once he had his own heir, then he's going to kill Caspian, right? Yeah. But, we don't have that specific part, but it's a very similar, like, father figure, distant, kind of questionable decision making, and so you're not really sure how you feel about them, but you're mostly raised by tutors anyway, so you're fine, So I think it speaks to the measure of his self-confidence that at no point did he have to put into words that he is their king, especially given that he is someone who only recently became a man by their standards. A child would have been petulant and demanded respect simply because he is the monarch. But Keihatsu proved himself a man in the way that he merely reminded them the authority that he wields without naming his title as the source of said power. He understands that the respect is not only something to be demanded. He really understands that respect is not something to be demanded, although it is clear he is in a position to give them something to fear, should they provoke him one time too many.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me. So, like, I've seen some clips on YouTube of Game of Thrones, and like just for curiosity's sake, I'll watch some of these clips because, like, I'm interested to know, like, how the political power plays work between people who are incredibly antagonistic. One of these characters is a child king who is just rotten to the core, and like he throws tantrums at the drop of a hat, and like one point, like, his uncle is just so fed up with him where he just straight up tells him he basically, in as many words, tells him go to bed, And he's like, how dare you tell me what to do? I am the king. And then his grandfather's like, anyone who has to say that he is the king is no true king. He's like, the king is tired. Retire him to his chambers. So literally, this kid is just ushered out.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Because he's being a brat and the adults have had it with him. So like, I'm very much going out of my way to avoid turning Keihatsu into that. Like, not really a spoiler, but we will see like not childish tendencies, but he's still a man in the making. And for the most part, he's handling things very well. But let's see what happens when he starts getting put under more stress, and like how he handles that.
Okay. I guess we're finally going to see some action in the next chapter. Let's go. Can't wait to see how you handle the Pokemon combat, especially given that it seems as though your main character himself will not be directly participating, but rather with Eevee on his behalf.
Yes.
You'll see. If I'm not mistaken, pretty much every combat scene you've written up till now have been done by putting the character themselves in the zone. I know that that's how it generally works, but I'm interested to see how you handle the secondhand combat, so to speak. Happy writing until the next chapter, Mataris.
Thank you.
Well, that's actually a really good segue into the chapter.
Yeah, like just real quick that like I hadn't thought about it that way, but I mean that would be the default that you write not even necessarily like in the first person. You can write them in the third person, but in the third person you have a main narrative or a main narrator.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is going to be secondhand combat, I guess would be the way to describe this.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you are used to as a martial artist, you're used to writing the choreography between adults or between like human beings, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I can't talk.
That's another thing that's going to make this very different is these are animals going at each other,
and it's like we're not. I mean, and I don't think they expect you to be like Flareon used fire ball or fire blast and it was not effective or
if you see that order of words appear in this story, it's gonna be more as a joke than anything. Yeah, I'm kind of going out of my way to avoid that.
Yeah, because we want to make it interesting.
I don't think the words super effective have been written by me in this story so far.
That's hilarious.
And I don't think that I'm going to because I don't see a reason why I would need to, but I'll let you guys listen to the chapter. We'll see what you guys make of the whole action sequence that happens, and then afterwards we're gonna have our friend Silver 4700 come on and give us his perspective on the chapter that we've all just listened to. So.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Yes, and we'll see you in a bit. Defender's Wrath. It took the company 2 days to reach the border by aircraft. Keihatsu and Oichi spent most of the first morning catching up on their rest, but by noon they were both fully refreshed and eager to continue their earlier discussions. The Lord of Aurora spoke with Oichi at great length about her knowledge of Pokémon, which turned out to rival, or may have even surpassed, his own. He soon discovered that she held a distaste for using the creatures in battle, despite understanding the necessity for it, and the bond that warriors and Pokémon shared with each other. It was a big part of why, though she likely possessed the talent to form a link, she had never sought out a Pokemon companion, for fear of being caught up in a battle between humans that had nothing to do with the concerns of their kind. As such, she mostly remained quiet during a strategy session with Takanobu and a few of his veteran warriors, though she politely answered any questions that Keihatsu put to her during that time. Once the discussion was done, the two young people were left alone in the observation room. It was while they enjoyed some refreshments that Oichi asked her host, "Do you think it might be possible to resolve the situation with Ignis without any bloodshed?" "One can always hope, but I doubt it," Keihatsu replied as he peered down at a map that Takanobu had given him, detailing the plan to repel a sizable force from the Fiery Nation at the border. Lord Hideyoshi may not command the respect of his men, but he hasn't been deposed by a rogue element thus far. To me, that speaks of a battle-conscious mind and a powerful link with his Pokemon, strong enough that he has yet to be defeated in combat. An unbroken winning streak like that will have made him overconfident in his own abilities, never mind those that serve under him. I think that in his mind, his victory will come simply because he wills it. Oichi mused before sipping at her tea. She peeked at the map for a moment before asking, "Will you simply be repelling his provocations, or will you invade Ignis?" Keihatsu immediately shook his head in the negative at the inquiry. "I don't aspire to rule over any other kingdoms but my Aurora."
he said firmly. As it stands, I don't even have the resources necessary for such an aggressive tactic. The only reason I am taking this many of my elite warriors with me is because I have it on good authority that Lords Montechica and Montanari are honorable men who seek nothing of expanding their own empires. He was speaking of the rulers of Fontaine and Greenleaf, respectively. If relations between our three kingdoms were not so relaxed, then I could not in good conscience leave my capital's borders so lightly guarded. However, since my intelligence reports that I have nothing to fear from them, I feel much better about bringing Takanobu's company with me on this mission. And what of your own safety? Oichi asked him curiously. What happens to Aurora if you fall in combat? Oh, I imagine there would be some infighting as to who should take the throne, he said tiredly, having heard the same question too many times from his advising council. I've ordered that my most capable retainers select their own candidate to replace me in the worst case, but they keep insisting that the succession would be more stable if I had an heir of my own. He scoffed at that. I refuse to bring a child into the world for the sole purpose of putting everyone else's mind at ease. Is that what happened with you? Oichi asked, remembering his narrative about his childhood years. More or less, Keihatsu nodded. At the very least, I don't want to leave an infant with the weight of my failed responsibilities on their shoulders, not to even speak of my grudges my enemies would doubtless hold against my progeny in my absence. That would be cruelty of the highest order in my eyes. May I ask you about a matter that you might consider sensitive? His companion asked hesitantly. He quirked an eyebrow at her and replied, You may ask without fear of retribution, but I do not promise an answer. Mollified by his response, Oichi said, You have spoken highly of your father in regards to his ability to lead your nation and keep the peace, yet your personal life seems in sharp contrast to the one that he led. Do you not remember him with any amount of fondness, or is it merely loyalty to the previous wearer of the crown that drives your actions as his son? Keihatsu pondered the question for a few moments in silence, the only sound being the hum of the aircraft's engines. When he did speak, his voice was subdued as he said, I suppose that any fondness I feel for my father is tied so closely with my loyalty to what he stood for that the two have become indistinguishable to me. I hardly knew him on a personal level, but there is no denying that he loved the people and Pokémon of our country, and for that I always have and always will admire him. Cocking his head slightly at her, he inquired, Why do you ask? Oichi appeared uncomfortable as she looked out the window and answered, I did not know my parents. I feel as though I should miss them, but I do not. Perhaps I am simply curious to know the viewpoint on the matter of someone who has had a similar experience to me. Turning back to face him, she bowed slightly and added, I apologize if I have overstepped my bounds and caused you discomfort. He waved the matter aside and said, It's of no consequence, Lady Oichi. I know whereof you speak in regards to our dearly departed. He let out a little laugh as he continued, I've often wondered if I'm a poor son for not mourning my father's passing more keenly. I try to justify it with the excuse that I must put the needs of my people before my own need to grieve, but the truth is that I do not feel so inclined to dedicate my time to the remembrance of his personal life. How could I when I was hardly involved in it? Oichi looked at him sadly as she walked over to stand in front of the desk that he sat at. At least you know that your mother loved you, she said softly. True, Keihatsu said through a half-laugh. I cannot say that I have been unloved, but sometimes I wonder if it would have been better that I had not known my mother's love so that I would not miss it in her absence. Then I shake my head and call myself a fool for wishing such an awful thing simply to avoid a little heartache. The girl was nodding along with his words as she said, You would not be the man you are without her love. If I may be so bold, I believe that your country is better off for the love that your mother showed you. Her words sent a warm glow of pleasure through his heart, bringing a smile to his face as he said, Thank you, Lady Oichi. Your kindness does my soul much good. The aircraft touched down at a border station that doubled as a medical ward for wounded warriors and their Pokémon in the afternoon, just as the sun was beginning to kiss the horizon. First to disembark was Takanobu and his personal squadron, followed by several of the other officers. Keihatsu and Oichi waited with Eevee in the observation room until most of the soldiers had gotten off, and affirmed the area was secure for the moment. Once he had been assured that there were currently no forces approaching from Ignis, the Lord of Aurora and his companions did exit the ship, quickly being greeted by a female warrior named Chiyo, who, Keihatsu had been informed, was in charge of the defenses of his nation at this checkpoint between the two countries. As there were two companies stationed at the checkpoint, there should have been another captain working alongside her, but the last skirmish had left him dead, certainly a factor in the council acknowledging the seriousness of the threat they now faced. The remaining captain was a woman in her early 30s with long brown hair, and dressed in light armor befitting her rank and station. Walking by her side as she approached was a Wigglytuff and a Zigzagoon, while on her head rested a Spearow. "My lord," Chio said as she took a knee, her face turned down toward the earth, her Pokemon also lowering themselves in his presence. "Forgive me my shameful weakness in allowing so many of my warriors to be wounded by the actions of Ignis. I am prepared to accept whatever punishment you see fit for my failure." It was clear from her subservient attitude that she fully expected to be replaced, possibly even executed, due to the situation at the border escalating under her watch, despite circumstances being out of her control. Keihatsu regarded her silently for a moment before he said, "Rise, servant mine. If you so believe that your efforts to keep our land safe truly merits a punishment, then I shall say only this. Return to your post, Captain Chio. Continue to guard our borders until our neighbors realize the futility of the attempts to take away our homes by force. Only then may you rest." He extended a hand out toward the woman as she looked up at him with no small measure of surprise. "Come now," he said encouragingly. "I'll need you to take Sir Takanobu and myself on the tour of the defenses before we can ascertain where we should place our men." "As you wish, Lord Keihatsu," Chio said as she rose to her feet with a formal salute, which he returned as a courtesy. Technically, since he was her superior, he was not required to exchange the formal greeting between warriors in the service of a kingdom, but he felt that it was only respectful that he do so. After all, at their core, they were both defenders of the kingdom. Looking around the trio of Pokemon at her side, Keihatsu asked, "Are each of them bound to you?" "Yes, my lord," she answered sharply. "Wigglytuff and I have been together for nigh on 20 years now, while Spearow and Zigzagoon have only joined me since I was charged with this post 5 years ago. We are strong together, my lord." "I believe it," Keihatsu said with a smile as he watched Eevee approach the Zigzagoon, both of them trilling excitedly over matters that he could not currently decipher. "My father did well to trust a warrior capable of forming a link with so many Pokemon with a station so precarious as this one." "Yes, I was saddened to hear of his passing," Chio said, a pained expression creasing her face. "But I swear to you now, my lord, I shall serve you as faithfully as I served him." "I am glad to hear it," the young man said politely. "Please escort me and my companion to your command center. I believe Sir Takanobu should already be inside." "Yes, my lord, quite so." "The situation is both worse than we knew, yet not as terrible as I had feared," Takanobu said as he, Keihatsu, and Chio stood around a table littered with maps and papers filled with their armed forces logistics, their Pokemon standing guard outside the door. Oichi was currently in the medical bay, having claimed knowledge of the healing arts, which the medical workers welcomed. Apparently they had been working themselves ragged as of late, so any help was of a boon to them. "Explain," Keihatsu ordered. "Our garrison's strength is nearly halved right now," Chio replied somberly. "The defensive structures and lookout posts themselves remain largely undamaged, but many warriors have fallen, and more of their Pokemon have joined them in the earth. My own nephew fell in service just alongside Captain Haruto last week, and I have not had the heart to tell my brother." "As you can imagine, morale is quite low," Takanobu said grimly. "We've not suffered any desertion, but I fear that with a situation this bad, it won't be long before some of these men begin to break. And once a Mightyena leaves the pack, it's rather difficult to stop others from following, until the group is split in two, or worse, they become loners." Keihatsu mused aloud. "Do you think the arrival of our capital forces will help morale?" "At least temporarily, yes," Chio nodded. "If we suffer major losses when Ignis next strikes, however, I foresee a great difficulty in even getting the men to stand at their posts. Then I shall see to it that Ignis rues the day that they stepped on my soil," Keihatsu said, a bright spark appearing in his eyes for just a moment. Looking up at his officers, he added, "We may lack the resources to mount a counterstrike against our arrogant northern neighbors, but on the grave of my father, I swear the next day the men of Ignis dare to come near our borders will be one they look back on with immeasurable regret." Takanobu, having worked closely with the previous warlord of Aurora, recognized that spark, and the powerful tone that Keihatsu now used. He is his father's son, make no mistake, he thought with approval. "Have you a plan, my lord?" he asked aloud. "Send 3 warriors with flying types large enough to carry them into the forest along the main road," Keihatsu ordered. "They are to send one back as soon as they come across any sizable party of warriors from Ignis. If Lord Hideyoshi runs true to form, he'll have another small army on its way already." "And the other 2? "They will continue to monitor the progress of our enemy from the shadows," he replied. "The second warrior is to return when the enemy is a day's journey away from us, and the last when they are 4 hours out. If they are spotted, they are to all return at once. I want them all back safely." Looking over at Chiyo, who still appeared troubled, he added in a soft tone, "We've already lost too many." "And what would you have the remainder of our forces do in the meantime?" Takanobu asked, already rifling through a list that detailed the names of his warriors and their Pokemon partners. "I want everyone not on the command staff to be replaced with fresh troops from the capital," Keihatsu ordered swiftly. Turning to Chiyo, he added, "I imagine the reality has already set in, but for the time being, I'm officially placing all of the late Captain Haruto's troops under your authority. You will be in charge of reorganizing the survivors into working squadrons so that we can have a proper company ready for the next battle. I know it's a bit of a rush order, and there will more than likely be some resistance from certain squads, but we're going to have to work with what we have available. Those of your commanding officers with injuries that render them incapable of battle will assist you in this administrative manner, while those who are largely uninjured will help Takanobu's chain of command become acclimated to their temporary duties as border patrols. Yours and Haruto's men have been through enough these last few months. They've earned as full a reprieve as we can afford them. There are sure to be warriors from the border guard who will not take well with sitting by and watching others take over their duties, even in conditions such as these," Takanobu cautioned him. "What should we have such soldiers do in the meantime?" "Send volunteer scouts into the forest in groups of 4 in multiple directions, but no further than a full day's journey," his leader replied after a moment of thought. "Hayashi does not strike me as someone to try and ambush us through the woods, but it doesn't hurt to be too careful. Keep your fighters at their posts, but make sure their spare time is spent training. I won't have my soldiers going soft, besides which it won't be doing them any favors to be idling." "Yes, my lord," Takanobu said as he saluted his commander. "I'll see to it right away." As the man left the room, Keihatsu turned back to Chiyo and said, "You have your orders, Captain. Go on." "My lord, if I may speak of one concern," she asked hesitantly. He nodded his approval, so she went on to say, "As Sir Takanobu surmised, I know there are those among my men who are still healthy that will likely want to maintain their usual duties, despite the reinforcements that you've brought." Keihatsu frowned slightly before he said, "I cannot claim to entirely understand. I'd have thought that they would be glad of a chance to rest after all their hardships." "I have no doubt there will be many who will welcome your offer, my lord," the soldier answered swiftly. "However, many of these men will have been here for nearly as long as you've been alive. It's an important posting, as we all know, and many of us guard it with pride, knowing that it is our accomplishments that keep this land of ours safe." Now understanding began to dawn on Keihatsu, which saw him nodding with his chin in his hand. Seeing this, Chiyo pressed on, saying, "We will do whatever our lord requires of us, but we would not wish him to think us so fragile that we be the ones in need of protection, even now." Drawing herself up to her full height, the woman said, "I know I speak for dozens of my men when I say that we would be proud to continue defending the border alongside our brothers and sisters from the capital." Keihatsu smiled into his hand before he dropped it and said, "You speak with much fire, Captain. I could almost mistake you for a native of Ignis. My grandfather on my mother's side was from Ignis, my lord." "Ah," Keihatsu chuckled before growing serious again. "You and your senior officers may remain on duty, but all the younger warriors not running as scouts are to take a respite. I will hear nothing further on the matter. Those that do wish to stay on duty will submit themselves to brief interviews with myself and Sir Takanobu. Is that understood?" "Yes, my lord," Chiyo said as she bowed to him from the waist. "Thank you." Dismissed. 2 days passed without incident. During the day, Keihatsu would run training simulations with Takanobu, Chiyo, and her senior officers, the sessions sometimes lasting for hours on end as they moved pieces across a map of the immediate area, their low-pitched voices carrying no further than the windows in the room where they were working. Every now and again, 1 or 2 of the staff officers would depart to carry out some order or another, but Chiyo and Takanobu only departed the room during the day to eat and relieve themselves. Their master was there most of the time, but he also saw to several other matters that demanded his direct attention, which had him walking up and down the length of the outpost often enough that his vassal had to step in and remind him to delegate tasks instead of trying to oversee it all himself. In spite of the man's caution, Keihatsu continued to work himself to the point where he nearly fell asleep on the maps in the command room in the dead of the second night. Takanobu succeeded in getting his young master back to his cabin on the ship, though with the stern reminder that because he had a very comfortable arrangement, he would be best served in taking proper advantage of it. Perhaps it was better for the man's military career that the warlord was too tired to give him a dressing down for his lack of manners in the manner that he addressed his sovereign, nor that he remembered anything cohesive enough to act on the following morning. A couple of hours into their stay, Keihatsu realized that he had somehow lost track of Oichi in the commotion of reorganizing his border guard. He had Evie search for her so that he could continue his work with Chiyo's sergeants, though he secretly worried she hadn't just decided to make a run for Fontaine on her own. His fear was short-lived, and what Evie told him was surprisingly extreme. Apparently, Oichi's studies in human and Pokemon biology went far beyond that of a curious mind seeking idle knowledge, as she proved when she walked into the med bay and saw a man in his Ursaring suffering from the after effects of a poison-type attack. She had, apparently, made herself busy at the apothecary table without a word to the medical orderlies, who were too busy to notice her presence until she was already administering the antidote that she had prepared to the suffering soldier and his partner. Apparently, the healers had been scrambling to make enough burn potions to aid most of the injured that they more or less forgot to prepare any antidotes. Said healers were stunned not only how quickly her potion worked, but how quickly she had to have made it. By the end of the day, the only thing holding the afflicted pair back from their former strength were the claw marks that had been brought about in the heat of battle by a vicious Blaziken. Following that, she was initially welcomed by the warriors as a volunteer aide, followed by a wholehearted reception from healers and warriors alike when Keihatsu personally informed the staff that she was to be deferred to and respected as a full-fledged combat surgeon. The girl then worked tirelessly in the crude hospital to treat all manner of injuries, also pausing only to take meals and sleep for a few hours each night before going right back to her self-appointed task each day. Oichi's work ethic impressed not only Keihatsu, but also his senior advisor, who treated her with more deference than his master had ordered him to, which told him that the man's respect was genuine. During the afternoons, Keihatsu and Eevee would spar with several soldiers, afterwards offering both humans and their Pokemon tips not only for combat, but general care and relationship building too. As the young lord continued to walk among his men and invest in their defenses himself, Oichi saw their respect and admiration for him grow from that of obligatory servitude to those of willing subjects. For those 2 days, all was well at the border, but despite Takanobu's insistence that he could handle whatever Ignis threw at him, Keihatsu refused to leave yet. If Hideyoshi does not attack us by the week's end, I will return home, the young man told his advisor as they left their latest strategy session with Chiyo. No sooner than the words had left his mouth than did a runner come up to the two of them, out of breath and sweating as he knelt in the dust before the two warriors. Lord Keihatsu, Sir Takanobu, the man gasped. Ignis warriors, they'll be here by nightfall. The two leaders exchanged alarmed looks at that. So close, Takanobu asked incredulously. How is this the first we hear of it, having sent our scouts out 2 days ago? The runner, without looking up from where he knelt, answered in a grave tone. One of your men was killed after the squad encountered a group of warriors riding their Charizards. The others were forced to hide while the enemy forces passed them by so they could recover from their injuries long enough to get here in time to warn us. Keihatsu's fist clenched angrily, but his face showed no sign of the rage burning in his heart. His tone was also even as he said, Takanobu, get the men ready to fight. Runner, rise and take me to the scouts. I want to talk to them myself. Yes, my lord. Takanobu said as he gave his master a short bow and swiftly departed for the command center. If you'll follow me, Lord Keihatsu, the runner said as he rose, though he kept his eyes averted from his sovereign. The young warlord found Oichi treating the two men that had come back, her delicate hands moving quickly as she applied burn medicine and bandages to their scorched flesh. Another woman at the next station was doing the same for their battered Pokemon. As they noticed him approaching, the two men tried to rise, but he held up a hand to forestall the movement and said, Do not get up on account of me, soldiers. Rest easy now. Thank you, my lord, said the younger of the two men, who sagged with relief into his triage bed. The other scout insisted on giving him a seated salute before he leaned back so that Oichi could finish binding his ribs. I apologize for our failure, my lord, he said heavily, and Keihatsu recognized him as the leader of the trio that Takanobu had sent out. You did not fail me, the young lord insisted as he moved to stand in front of the man so he could look him in the eyes. You've given us a few hours to prepare our defenses, which is far more than the warriors of the station have had in the past. Thanks to you, we have a chance to drive back these bandits with some force, not just hold them off for a little bit longer again. I failed, Itsuki, the man insisted sadly. He had a girl back in the capital that he was supposed to come home to. He spoke often of beginning a family with her. How can I go back, knowing that I will have been the one failed to bring him home to her? You will return home telling his loved ones that his sacrifice purchased their freedom, Keihatsu told him firmly. It will not fill the gap that his death creates, but it at least gives the end of his life meaning. And I swear to you on my own throne, not 1 foot originating from Ignis will set upon the soil of Aurora this day. Oichi glanced up at him and saw the pain that was present in his eyes and the righteous anger that came as a result of the unnecessary death of his soldier. In that brief moment, she saw not Keihatsu, the kind young man that had taken her in, but the mighty warlord of Aurora. That evening, the forces of Ignis arrived at the border between the two kingdoms, coming in at around 300 warriors and their Pokémon. The men were surprised to find the place heavily defended by numbers far superior than what they had been led to believe. Their leader, a pale man with dark hair and burning eyes, accompanied by a chandelure, scanned the place and scowled with irritation at the sight. Keihatsu decided that it was time he made himself known to the intruders. "Warriors of Ignis!" he called from the top of a sentry tower that overlooked the road, his voice ringing clearly throughout the forest. "Identify yourselves and state your purpose." "Or else what, boy?" the pale man sneered. "Did your commanding officer die and leave the place in your charge, or was there simply no one left that wasn't wet behind the ears?" Takanobu, who was standing beside his master, drew in a breath to berate the intruder, but Keihatsu held up a hand to forestall him. "My lord?" the warrior inquired, confused as to why he would allow this invader to address him so rudely. "Tell Snorlax to fire a hyper beam right in front of him as a warning shot," Keihatsu said in an undertone while barely moving his lips. Takanobu grinned and replied, "Gladly, my lord." He concentrated on sending the wordless message to the massive Pokemon sitting at the base of the tower, then relaxed and said, "It is done." No sooner than the words had left his mouth than did Snorlax open its maw and unleash a massive beam of light that struck the ground directly in front of the robed man, causing many of the men from Ignis to recoil in fear, now knowing that each and every one of them were within the range of a very accurate hyper beam. To his credit, their leader did not even flinch from the proximity of the attack, nor the implications behind it. He simply looked at the big Pokemon for a few seconds, then returned his gaze back to Keihatsu, whose face was set like flint. "That was your only warning," the young warlord informed them. "Take another step toward Aurora, it just might be the last thing you do. Provoke me again, it'll be the same. So for the last time, who are you and what were you doing with an army at our border?" The man stared at him flatly before he answered, "I am Lord Kanbei of Ignis, servant to Warlord Hideyoshi. My master sends me here as the advance party in order to pave the way for his full invasion of Aurora." Keihatsu reddened angrily, but he kept his voice calm as he replied, "Answer me one last question before I send you home with your tails between your legs." Gritting his teeth, he demanded, "Are you the man responsible for the raids on my country?" "I am not," Kanbei replied quickly. "Those pathetic raids were led by another warrior from the noble houses of Ignis. My lord became irritated by the lack of progress being made by Hanbei, and so he has sent me to take up the slack." "Then if you make it home, tell your master and your peer this," Keihatsu said as he gave a signal with his hand, which saw to the better part of 100 warriors and their Pokemon stepping forward, all of them thrumming with nervous energy in anticipation of the fight. Chio was at the head of the column when their warlord thundered, "Aurora suffers the harm done to her people no more! From now on, any drop of our blood spilled by your hands will be avenged tenfold!" His men all regarded him with surprise. None of them had ever seen him angry before, but they could now grasp how someone so young could hold his position as a warlord amid those that would seek to take his throne. Calm and kind though he was, Keihatsu was a powerful young man, and it now showed as he displayed the full force of his imperial birthright. Even the warriors of Ignis shifted in place uncomfortably, suddenly wary as they realized that the soft boy that Hideyoshi had described to them might actually be a harder character than he was given credit for. Kanbei, however, was not impressed. "Forward company, form ranks!" he ordered, and the soldiers before him took up their position, even as their Pokemon gathered in front of them, the air heating up as the fire-type creatures sensed their partner's anticipation for battle. Keihatsu let out a long breath, disappointed. He had hoped to resolve the situation without bloodshed, but he was enough of a realist to know that pacifism was not going to see them through this conflict. Drawing himself up, he shouted, "Warriors of Aurora, prepare to defend your homes! Deo, Ecclesiae, Patriae! Deo, Ecclesiae, Patriae!" His soldiers all roared in agreement, their own partner Pokemon adding their voices to create a cacophony of battle cries. As Keihatsu made to walk to the front lines with his soldiers, Takanobu hurried to keep up with him. "My lord, do you truly mean to take part in this battle?" he asked worriedly. "If you were to die now, I will not fall here," Keihatsu said sternly, his gaze unwavering as Eevee ran up from where he had been waiting with Oichi, who looked on with worry as her new friend went to confront what might be his death. He had ordered the girl to stay away from the battlefield, as she was no warrior, but she insisted on remaining near the medical station in order to care for any injured in the coming fight. Flashing her a confident smile, Keihatsu added to his advisor, My men stand ready to fight on my behalf today, and I will return that favor. Now prepare yourself and Snorlax, Takanobu. We have work to do. The older warrior sighed heavily, but he moved to do as he was told. He knew by now there was no point in arguing with his master once he had set his mind to something. Now he could only pray that the young warlord survived this conflict. Satisfied that the defenses were in place as best as they could be, Keihatsu reached down and patted Eevee on the head, who nuzzled his hand affectionately in return. Ready, boy? He asked quietly as he walked among a group of warriors, who all gave him a bow of respect as he came into their midst. His Pokemon let out a trill in response, and he smiled at him. Good. Looking back across the path, he saw that Kanbei had ordered an advance of over 50 Pokemon, a little less than a quarter of his total forces. A quick glance upward also revealed a half-dozen menacing-looking Charizards. I'm beginning to wish Naoshige had come with us, he thought, remembering the experienced warrior's powerful braviary. Oh well, no use griping now. You two, he said as he looked at a pair of brothers, each of them partnered with a Linoon. Have you rehearsed for dealing with flyers? Yes, my lord, the elder brother said sharply. Then take them out, and be sure to spread the effect as far as possible, he ordered. By your command, warlord, the younger man said, his brow already furrowing in concentration. Next to him, his Linoon perked up before letting loose a howl toward the sky, where rain clouds began to gather rapidly. In less than 10 seconds, the pending battlefield was soaked in rainwater, and Keihatsu smiled slightly as he heard many of the warriors from Ignis cursing the weather. It was only to be expected. After all, fire types could only fight at half their strength during rainy conditions like this. However, that wasn't Keihatsu's only reason for summoning the water from the sky. Now, he told the other brother. Without a word, his warrior sent a mental command to his Pokemon, a slightly smaller Linoon than his brother's. The creature bristled, then let out a war cry of its own as an ominous rumble echoed down from the clouds, followed quickly by a massive blast of lightning that struck down all the flying-type Pokemon from the air, as well as smiting several of those that were on the ground below. Men and women from Ignis cried out in agony as they felt their partner's pain as their own, many of them collapsing where they stood, some without a sound. It was the price that all warriors paid for linking to a Pokemon. Whatever pain their partner felt, they would receive upon their own flesh, even unto death. Keihatsu briefly shut his eyes against the dying cries of the enemy forces, but then he hardened his heart. These invaders had made his people suffer, and as protector of the realm he could not stand for it, no matter how unpleasant he found the ordeal. Squadrons A through D, move out, he shouted. Take them down, but if they plead for mercy, give quarter. Squadron B, you fight with me. A single squadron consisted of 9 warriors in addition to their commanding officer. 40 people and their Pokemon were almost a quarter of his available forces, but he decided it was best to press the advantage while Kanbei's Pokemon were reeling from the thunder attack. The men acknowledged the orders with a shout that sent their Pokemon out into the field of battle to meet their enemies. Eevee leading the pack that belonged to the warriors of the 2nd Squadron. The warriors stayed standing where they were, but their spirits went out with their partners into battle. Keihatsu shut his eyes and allowed himself to see the world through Eevee's gaze. Noticing the little creature was on a collision course with a large Darmanitan, he sent the silent command, dig. Just like that, Eevee dove beneath the surface of the earth, feeling the tremors on the ground as the heavy fire type passed over him. Following the source of those tremors, Eevee allowed the energy of the earth to seep into him, strengthening him until he shot back up toward his foe, bursting out of the ground and crashing right into the bigger Pokemon's stomach, hitting a vital spot and rendering it immediately unconscious. There was no time to celebrate the victory, though. Keihatsu winced as he heard one of the warriors next to him crying out in pain as his Apom was ruthlessly pummeled by an Emboar. Toxic, he commanded. Eevee obeyed instantly, gathering poison in his stomach before hurling it at the giant pig-like Pokemon. The thing immediately recoiled as purple miasma covered its body, its movements now weak and sluggish as opposed to the quick, brutal blows it had been dealing only a moment ago. The flames that formed its beard would slowly begin to die down, and Keihatsu knew the strike was good. Facade. His partner rushed its opponent, slamming his little shoulder into the beast's snout as he leaped up, a small shockwave erupting from the point of contact. Emboar grunted, then let out a huge sigh as it collapsed, the mud snuffing out the last of its fire. That move was an incredibly potent mix with his partner's toxic attack, since it doubled in power whenever it collided with a target affected by a battle-inflicted condition. Keihatsu nodded in satisfaction before telling Eevee to help the wounded Apom back to the safety of the medical bay. As his partner dragged his comrade through the mud, he opened his own eyes to see the battle from afar. He was pleased to see that despite the battle having hardly begun, the first wave of enemy forces had been all but routed, and with surprisingly minimal injuries to his own army. Deciding that was enough for now, he ordered an immediate return. He could tell that some of his soldiers wished to press the attack, but they all obeyed his command regardless. Keep a lookout, Keihatsu told 2 sergeants. We've only bought ourselves a small reprieve. They'll be attacking again soon. Have your squadrons on standby, ready to counter. We'll send reinforcements when you do. Takanobu approached him just as the Pokemon began to come back to the border post, several of them carrying wounded comrades. Oichi moved along with several other medical officers to begin treating the injured fighters. Are you all right, my lord? He asked as he noticed Keihatsu rubbing his right shoulder with a slight grimace. Shall I have the lady tend to you? No, she has more pressing concerns than a bit of an ache in my arm, he answered as he took his hand away from the sore spot. He now realized that it had been a mistake to show discomfort, even silently, for such a minor injury. Now Takanobu would worry about him unnecessarily. Nevertheless, he asked in an attempt to distract the man, how are our warriors? A few broken bones and a man that will need to be treated for serious burns in his legs, but other than that, they will all be ready to be back in a battle at your command, his advisor reported. Good, the young lord said with satisfaction. I want our capable men reformed into their ranks in 10 minutes, no later. I'm going back to the front with our reinforcements. But my lord, your arm is fine, Keihatsu said in a tone that brooked no further argument. See to the men, Takanobu. My lord. With a deep bow, the man rushed off to carry out his orders. It happened to be quite fortuitous timing, because it was at that moment that Eevee came into view, struggling to keep the wounded Apom on his back, despite of his soaked fur and the mud on the ground. Keihatsu darted forward and scooped up the little monkey-like creature before it could hit the ground again, not caring that his armor was now covered in wet earth. The Apom looked as though he had been roughed up pretty badly, but nothing that would constitute as life-threatening. Well done, my friend, he said gratefully to Eevee, who replied with a happy, if tired, yap. Let's get our comrade to the healer, shall we? His partner barked again, so the young man stood up from the mud and made his way over to the medical bay, Eevee trailing behind him with a slight limp in his gait. He found Oichi just as she was finishing up with the Linoon that had been burnt by a Torkoal's flamethrower. Got room for one more? He asked her as the skinny Pokemon sped away, eager to return to its warrior. Yes, what happened to him? She asked as she turned around, washing her bloodied hands in a basin as she glanced at the Pokemon in his arms. Actually, I think it's a she, was stomped on by a rather vicious Emboar. He answered as he set the injured Pokemon down on the cot. Eevee got her out of the fight okay, but I do believe there's some head trauma. Yes, the girl murmured, her practiced hands running gently along the wounded animal's body. Thank you for bringing her here. I should thank you for working so hard this whole time, Keihatsu said gratefully before being struck by a thought. I suppose I'm a rather careless man, having only just realized that I haven't thanked you properly for tending to those wounded in my care. It's only right that I serve you however best that I am able, she replied monotonously. Her tone was so different from the shy one that she normally used that it caught him by surprise, enough so that he sat down across the cot and asked, Sorry, have I done something to offend you? No, not you, she said tiredly as she began to administer medicine to the wounded Pokemon. It's just all of this. The fighting, the wounded. It's just like where I fled from. I thought I could get away from it all, but bloodshed seems to be everywhere across Rensai. Her sadness was profound, and Keihatsu finally noticed that while her movements were practiced, her hands were trembling, though from emotion or exhaustion he could not tell. Maybe it's both. Reaching out over Apom, he grasped one of her shaking hands in both of his as he said, I tell you this now, Oichi, as a vow to both you and my people. She looked up from her patient to meet his eyes as he said solemnly, I will not, now or ever, incite this kind of bloodshed and carnage on other nations, in Rensai or otherwise. I will only meet violence with violence in order to protect those under my care, never in pursuit of personal gain, and even then I will not raise a fist without a heavy heart. Her trembling did not cease, but she did squeeze his hands for a moment before she said, I hope that your words will prove true, my lord. "5 minutes after the first attack had been repelled, Keihatsu and a fresh platoon stood ready to face off against the forces of Ignis. This time, the young lord noticed that Kanbei's Chandelure was at the head of the company that was twice the size of his assembled squadrons. He's not taking us lightly again, he thought grimly. Squads E and G, I want a reverse wedge formation. Channel the bulk of their forces into a single point near the gate as soon as they come at us, he ordered, surprising his men. My lord, that would bring them right toward us, I know, Keihatsu interrupted Takanobu. They're mostly out of flyers, so I doubt they can even flank us, which puts us in a position to trap them in a pincer movement. We can add to this by rushing at them with squads F and H once we have them more or less concentrated into a narrower target. I see some Litwick in that Chandelure, Chio said in a low tone, just barely making herself heard above the rain. They could phase through our defenses and flank us without being able to touch them. Leave the Chandelure to Eevee and me, Keihatsu ordered, his eyes never wavering. As for those Litwick, have our Bibarel give them a cold shower. Normal-type Pokemon may have been looked down on for their lack of strengths, but there were certainly a lot of dual-type natures and an even larger variety of moves that Keihatsu could make use of. Here they come, Takanobu muttered, pointing at the massive Pokemon that were now charging at them from across the no-man's land. Warriors of Aurora, you have your orders, Keihatsu shouted. If we beat them back now, we'll have gone through more than half their forces. You heard him, Chio added as the Pokemon under their command began to move rapidly, lining up in the formation that Keihatsu had wanted. Each of you and your partners could take down 5 Pokemon in your own in the wild, so defeating 2 apiece should be nothing but an exercise. For Aurora! For Aurora! The men echoed, followed by the roars of their Pokemon. Eevee sped through the battle that raged around him, ignoring the ache in his shoulder for the sake of his master, though it pained him to know that his actions would afflict his partner of heart, Keihatsu, as well. Still, he was aware that if they did not drive back the Fire Spitter Hot Bloods, more pain and suffering would fall upon his plain blood kin, and even their partners of heart. So for them, he ignored his wounds, even as he knew his master bore them without complaint, and bared his teeth at the 2 legs' yellow feathers that stood between him and his intended prey. Before he could attack the invader, a thin legs 3 heads brother sped in between them and began jabbing their enemy with vicious force. Letting out a squawk with one of their heads, the other Pokemon told Eevee to move on and show the not dead, not alive fire which led the enemy forces that the lands of Aurora would not be ceded so easily by its hardy occupants. Thanking his ally with a bark, Eevee felt the soul echo power that his master possessed flooding into him, driving him to move faster than his small muscles would normally allow. Weaving between a melted rock slug and a red-eye's fire quills, Eevee barked a challenge to the not dead, not alive fire, which regarded him with silent yellow eyes that reminded Eevee of a dried-up sunflower. From the enemy, he smelled nothing but disdain for his task and the little creature that stood in its path. The fur on Eevee's back and mane stood on end as he growled at the dead skin man's partner of heart. He knew that if he could defeat this one Fire Spitter Hot Blood, his master would collapse, and the other humans would have no pack leader to organize their movements. Remember, Eevee, your normal attacks won't have any effect on him, Keihatsu said in his mind. He can't use any shadows against you, but his flames will burn you. Be careful and wait for the right moment. Eevee's ears flicked backward as he lowered his head while keeping his eye on his enemy, as they began to circle each other, even as the battle between kingdoms raged around them. The Fire Bloods had the advantage of numbers, but the Plain Bloods held a resolve that would not break so easily, putting the match at an even pace so far. All it would take was one little tip of the scales from the Wheel of Fate, and the battle would be quickly decided, and Eevee intended to act as the hand of destiny for his master's sake. With a savage yap, Eevee sprang at his foe, poison gathering in his belly before he spat it at the ground beneath the Deadeye's enemy, enveloping them in a toxic mist that sickened him quickly, the purple-blue flame that danced behind his eyes flickering with much less vigor than before. Unfortunately, this did leave Eevee open for a retaliatory attack from his enemy, which saw him enveloped in a raging fire column. The flames themselves did not do much more than lightly singe him, but the heat they generated was unbearable. He could feel his vision growing blurry as the volcanic temperature threatened to overwhelm him, and his paws felt ready to give way beneath his trembling legs. Dig, Eevee! He could feel Keihatsu's worry and urgency for him clearly across their soul joining, and it gave him just enough force of will to ignore the awful heat and burrow his way into the ground, where it quickly became cooler on his singed fur and sweaty skin, much to his relief. However, he knew he couldn't lie down and rest just yet, in spite of a much-needed reprieve. The land of the Plain Bloods needed him, and Keihatsu needed him. He would finish this battle so they could all rest without worry, and so that his master could return to a life of peace, hopefully with the healing hand's kind heart Oichi. Shoving himself up to break the skin of the earth, he found himself a few yards behind the Deadeyes that had nearly roasted him into oblivion. Almost before Keihatsu had sent another mental command, Eevee felt the not dead, not alive orb beginning to form in his jaws, growing in size until it was too big for his teeth to contain, and he spat it at the unsuspecting Fireblood. His enemy was instantly enveloped in an explosion of shadow that saw to the cessation of the fire tornado that would have torched him to death. When it cleared away, the not dead, not alive fire lamp was lying prone in the mud, unmoving. Moving quickly, Eevee sniffed at the other Pokemon to confirm that it was still alive, then let out a victorious howl. The declaration caught the attention of many nearby Plainbloods and Firebloods, and he felt the despair in the hearts of the Fireland natives as they recognized that their alpha had been bested in battle. From across the battlefield, Keihatsu breathed a huge sigh of relief as he opened his eyes to confirm Eevee's victory cry. He could see that the men and women of Ignis were now losing cohesion in their ranks, and he knew it was time to press the attack to its fullest. "All reserve forces, advance in Sharpedo formation," he ordered the nearby officers. "I want these invaders rounded up and lined up in front of me before the sun rises." "My lord, forgive my impertinence, but surely you don't mean to give them quarter," Takanobu asked him as the rest of the senior staff moved to obey, shouting instructions at their subordinates. "We don't have the resources to—" "I am well aware of the state of our resources," Keihatsu said to cut him off, silencing the other man instantly. Struggling to his feet due to the burns he had received on account of Eevee's injuries, he thanked his advisor when he helped him up before adding, "I have no intention of housing any of them. That I can assure you." "Then it is to be an execution, my lord?" Takanobu asked, looking surprised. He would have never thought that Keihatsu would be inclined to such a violent solution, but then again, it was the young lord's first international skirmish. Perhaps he truly isn't so kind to our enemies as he is to our subjects, then. However, what his lord said next completely befuddled him. "Whether or not there is an execution may be up to our neighbors," Keihatsu told him as he forced his burnt body to stand tall and proper before taking his weight off of his advisor. "Now, let's tend to our men. Have Oichi and the other clerics begin passing around bandages and burn potions." Yes, my lord, right away." There was more fighting, but within the hour, the forces of Ignis collapsed under the weight of the disciplined Auroran army. Some 120-odd Pokemon and their warriors were lined up in front of Keihatsu when it was over, who still bore his Pokemon's burn wounds, despite Eevee himself having received medical treatment, the young Warlord declaring that his men needed the extra medicine more than he. The rest of Ignis' forces were lying dead on the battleground or had managed to evade capture, though the last group was made up of a very small number. Keihatsu's face was passive as he gazed out at the defeated warriors, his own men standing with swords ready in hand. Oichi gazed out from the medical center, her expression a mixture of sadness and betrayal. "I believed him when he said he wanted to end this without bloodshed," she thought as she watched the scene unfolding before her. "I suppose it was foolish to believe that such a leader could exist in this world." "Warriors of Ignis!" Keihatsu's voice rang out across the field, cutting off any more idle thoughts from those around him. His tones commanded instant and unwavering attention from the people and Pokemon gathered there. "You have before you two options. In one, you will live and be free to return to your home. The second will see your head separated from your shoulders." He could see the stirrings of unease and hopeful interest working their way through the crowd, as well as the confusion in the hearts of his own soldiers, but they did him proud by not wavering in their vigilant watch over their defeated enemies. "The conditions for your release are not negotiable," he continued. "They are as follows. First, you will take your dead home to be buried. I will not have the sap of their limbs tainting my soil." He could see the confusion building up even more, both in the faces of his warriors and Kanbeis. He let them mutter among themselves for a few more seconds before he added, "The second condition to your release is that you will sever your links with your Pokemon. Failure to comply means beheading by the sword." Now the battleground was dead quiet. Even the wind moving through the trees around them seemed strangely muted in the wake of his proclamation. Some of the Pokemon stirred uneasily, but none of them made any aggressive moves just yet. Seeing that the message had gone home, Keihatsu declared, "You have 15 minutes to set your Pokemon free. If you don't know the process, speak to one of my ranking officers. They will tell you how it goes. Those that do so will be allowed to leave in peace, and we will see to it that your former partners make it to Ignis' territory safely at a later date. Once the 15 minutes are up, everyone that remains with their Pokemon will be executed. However, we will still see to the safety of your partners just as we will the other Pokemon that are released." Unlike the way that warriors received wounds from their Pokemon partners, anything that happened to the man or woman linked to the creature did not physically reflect on their partner. So if a warrior was clubbed in the back of the head by a thug, his or her Pikachu would not be tangibly affected in the slightest. This meant that even if the humans were killed by Keihatsu's men, their partners would live. From a military stance, this was a genius move. Whichever way the warriors chose, Ignis would now be short by well over 200 Pokemon and their warriors. Even if the people that walked away from their Pokemon lived, their morale would be incredibly low, making them unlikely to try for another fight anytime soon. However, from the view of a civilian, this was a horrible situation, and Oichi found that she could not bear to watch what came next. She shut the door to the medical center and sat down beside the wooden frame while burying her face in her hands as tears began to pour out of her eyes. How could he do such a thing? She thought bitterly. Those that survive this will never truly live again. It's like he's asking them to cut out their own hearts in exchange for living. She was under no delusions about the atrocities that Ignis had committed against their southern neighbors, but this just seemed wrong on a spiritual level. It went beyond the destruction of the flesh. It would wound these people to their cores in such a way that they would never really recover. Should I try to stop this? She wondered as her breathing continued to be ragged. He said that he wants me to advise him, but would he even listen to me when I have no experience in planning warfare? She tugged at her hair, frustrated with her inability to make a decision as the minutes ticked away, moving inexorably toward the moment where many lives would be claimed. When the 15 minutes had elapsed, Keihatsu noticed there were only 19 of the original 100-odd warriors that were still standing within their Pokémon. All the others had severed their links, many of them without even a word of goodbye, and turned their backs to begin walking toward Ignis through the now dark forest. Their Pokémon had been led away by many of the Auroran warriors to an enclosure where the army Pokémon normally rested, none of them resisting. Without the aggression of their warriors to spur their actions, many of them simply felt a hollow sense of loss, which would be enough to take the fight out of just about anybody. Among those who had decided to stay, Keihatsu was interested to see Kanbei, who was resolutely kneeling beside his chandelure, which glowed with a faint lavender flame inside its body. Walking over to the pale man with a borrowed sword in hand, he and Eevee stopped just short of the pair, the Ignis native glaring up at him with coal black eyes. So this is how it ends, he said flatly. It would seem so, Keihatsu replied as he raised the sword over his head. Perhaps this will teach your warlord not to trespass on my lands. Kanbei snorted derisively at that. Lord Hideyoshi is a stubborn man, he murmured. He will not relent until his inferno spreads or it burns itself out. There is no middle ground for him. Poetic, Keihatsu muttered before he brought his sword down, blood decorating the silver blade as it struck the earth. Tell him that fire only burns so long as it is tolerated, and if he makes a move against my people again, I will personally snuff him out. Flinging the droplets of blood off his tool as he walked away, the young warlord added, Now get out of here and take your soldiers and the other Ignisian Pokémon with you. Eevee yapped loudly as if to add a punctuation mark to the order. Kanbei grimaced as he held the split flesh of his cheek together, blood spilling down his face and into his neck. That's it, he demanded as Keihatsu made a motion with the dirtied blade for his warriors to stand back and begin putting away their own weapons. You're giving me a slap on the wrist and sending me on my way. You and your men showed a devotion to your Pokémon that I admire, Keihatsu answered without turning around as he took a cloth from his pocket and used it to clean the borrowed sword. I'm sparing you now out of a respect for that bond. However, he turned to look over his shoulder at his defeated enemy with fire in his eyes that surpassed any volcano in Ignis as he added, Take one step back toward my home. Take one step sideways on the path back to Ignis, and it will mean your death. Kanbei did not doubt for 1 second the young warlord was telling the truth. My lord, are you certain that was wise, letting them go? Takanobu asked as he sat in the medical bay while Oichi tended to the Keihatsu's burns and fractured shoulder. Apparently the damage done to the bone had been more intense than he had originally realized, and now it seemed as though he would begin a cast for a few days while it healed up. The girl herself had said not one word to either of them, except to give Keihatsu instructions whenever she needed him to change positions, or if she was going to do something that would hurt. Normally the warlord might have worried about her silence, but at the moment he was too tired and sore to think about it. I certainly wouldn't call it wise, Keihatsu admitted with a pained grin as Oichi applied some ointment to his right hand. But I never had any intention of killing those warriors once the battle was over. The heat of a fight is one thing, but when it comes to prisoners who have surrendered, I refuse to be an arbitrary executioner. I would rather they choose their own sentence, should the circumstances allow it. Besides, he grimaced again as Oichi applied a bandage to his abused skin, if those people valued their own lives more than their bond with their trusted partners, they have no business being warriors in the first place. So anyone that values a Pokemon more than themselves are the only ones that should be allowed to be warriors, Oichi said in a subdued tone. Is that what you believe? Blinking her in surprise a few times, Keihatsu answered, No, not at all. It's just that... How do I put this? Takanobu, sensing some tension between the two of them, made an excuse and left them alone, which Keihatsu wasn't sure that he liked at this point. You were saying, my lord? Oichi asked him, her voice still neutral. Pokemon put their lives on the line for the sake of our battles when we could just be fighting them ourselves, he said carefully. But they choose to be with us, to share our burdens with us in whatever form that they take. If someone doesn't care to take that sacrifice into consideration, they personify selfishness. And I don't have it in me to see Pokemon treated like nothing more than tools by their masters. It's why I did what I did. Are you crying? Oichi sniffled as her shoulders began to shake while tears dripped from her eyes and she wound up dropping the bandages for his leg. I'm sorry, my lord, she hiccuped. I thought you were going to kill them all. As she desperately tried to wipe away the unrelenting tears, she hiccuped. I thought for a moment that you would be just like Nobunaga. Oh. He realized that since he hadn't shared his plan with her in advance like he had with Takanobu and Chiyo's officers, it well could have seemed like he fully intended to kill his captives. She had told him about Nobunaga's habit of killing warriors and Pokemon, even in his own ranks, that he deemed weak. Having fled from what sounded like many similar scenes before, it occurred to him now that that particular display might have been construed as distressing. Clearing his throat, he said in a soft tone, Lady Oichi, I apologize for upsetting you. It was not my intention to cause you grief. You don't have to apologize to me, she said haltingly. You don't owe a comment or any explanations. But I should bear my confidant's concerns in mind, he replied a little bashfully. Yes, as a warlord, my decisions are final, but as your friend, I should be more considerate. And I should have more faith in you, she gasped. You keep telling me that you are different from other warlords, and I have continued to doubt you. I will not do so any more. Keihatsu nodded solemnly before his sides began to shake with laughter that he was trying desperately to contain. When Oichi gave him a confused and slightly hurt look, he only just managed to say, I'm sorry. I know you meant what you said. I swear I'm taking this as seriously as I can, but... He tried again to stifle his giggling since it was actually quite painful, but continued to fail as he gasped out, The hiccups are just ruining the whole thing! My what? She asked him, her eyes still dripping, but her lips quirking upward. Why is that? Keihatsu erupted into a full-on belly laugh, clutching at his aching shoulder, while his burns announced their displeasure at being moved. I'm sorry, he wheezed. I swear I'm trying to stop it, but... Another hiccup from his friend ruined his attempt to get control of himself, and he gave into the helpless, oh-so-painful laughter. It got worse when Oichi smacked him on the uninjured arm, but by that point, she too was infected by the merriment. As Takanobu stood outside the medical bay door, he shook his head in a mixture of exasperation and a bit of wonder. I do not understand my lord, he thought as he walked away. Still, if today had proven anything, it was that Aurora had a leader that valued her people, Pokemon, and the efforts that went into defending her. I wonder what the people of Ignis will think when they hear of his mercy, such as it was. That night, Eevee came to sleep in the same bed in the infirmary as Keihatsu, both of them appreciating the closeness after the separation during the battles that day. Oichi finished applying the medicine the warlord needed before gathering up her tools and saying, I'll be in the next room if you require assistance with your wounds. Keihatsu acknowledged this with a slight head inclination, which she returned with a full bow. As she straightened up, she paused at Eevee's head level and murmured, You have a wonderful master, Eevee. Take good care of him. With that, she kissed the little Pokemon on the head and straightened up. Walking away, she added, Good night, my lord. Good night, he replied as she turned the corner into the next room. When he looked down to see Eevee giving him a particularly smug look, he muttered, Shut up, you. She didn't do it to me because you got burned on the head and I'm still oozing fluids into my bandages. No one wants to kiss that. Eevee let out a small snort, closed his eyes, and lowered his head onto Keihatsu's leg. Rolling his eyes, Keihatsu muttered, Yeah, you're right. I have to wonder if she knew that I would feel it too, or if that was just an accident. Eevee's response made him smile, and he closed his eyes, whispering, I hope so.
All right.
Alrighty.
Man, how are you guys doing? How's
we
life
just
been
got our
treating ya?
car back after 50 days of it being in the shop.
Oh, nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
I think
Yeah,
I told you
someone
guys
who
about
is-
when that. I think I told you guys about when I got broken into. And
Oh
all
yeah,
that.
yeah, that's right. Man, again, I'm sorry. to hear-
No, it's fine. You forget. Like it's been that long.
Yeah. And there was that reminds me, like there was this one time, like when I was like, what was it? I was 19 and I was on my way to college and I got into a not a major accident, but major enough that my car needed to be sent to the shop. And so that was an experience. And the worst part was again I was at college. My family was like literally across the state from me, so that was a fun experience. But no, everything turned out all right in the end. And
good.
everything was, but yeah, the point I'm trying to make is that I relate. So, maybe not on the scale of like somebody like actually like doing that much damage, but in the sense of like waiting for your car.
Mate, I kept getting like text messages after text messages, like as to how much the repairs were gonna add. Like, fortunately we have very good insurance, so I only had to pay like a deductible.
Okay,
But, like,
that's good.
I want to say it was close to like $10,000 in damages done to the car.
Holy cheat! Yeah, no, that checks out.
Yeah, it was. I was like after one text in
Yeah,
particular
I'm
I got,
sorry,
I was like,
man.
that number can't be right.
Gee, yeah, I think like when my car, because again, the only thing that happened with my car is that thankfully, some part of the engine was damaged and it had affected the air conditioning as well. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I do remember like oh wait, no, it had to do with my bumper as well or something like that. But it came out to be like 3,000 if I remember correctly. Nothing too bad, but like for a college student, you know.
Yeah, that's not great.
But ultimately, but yeah, no, it's great to hear that you guys got your car back.
Yeah,
So,
thanks.
Nice.
Thanks.
Wonderful to hear. Very wonderful.
And then I'm officially hitting my late 20s tomorrow.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, first of all, happy early birthday.
Thanks.
No problem. No problem. I'll be sure to send all the birthday wishes, and especially the ones.
I'm sure Amira's gonna like break out. I know she's been training with Robin in the ways of the memes. I'm sure all the old man memes are coming my way.
Exactly. Oh my word, you love to see it. Have anything planned, or are you just kind of chilling?
I'm gonna be having a party.
Oh yeah, that's right. I think you mentioned that over. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. There's a reason we're not recording this on a Friday night.
Yeah. Not with that attitude. Oh man, but seriously, happy birthday, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
How about you, Becca? How is Becca there? Or
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I was stuffing my
no, it's
face.
all right. just making sure. I didn't want to like just blow you off or anything like that. But
you're
yeah,
good, you're good.
She
how
rediscovered
was
the
everything?
joys of mint chocolate chip ice cream.
I haven't had. It was my favorite ice cream growing up, and ever since we got married, I haven't bought it because Joe doesn't want it, and I don't want to eat the entire thing.
Oh, you gotta get like the small cans.
Right.
Yeah.
See, but I'm too cheap. I'm like, if I'm spending that much money, you might as well get a big one, you know? And so
You're not wrong.
And so now that my kids are
man.
big enough, the other day they were like, "Mom, what does mint chocolate chip ice cream taste like?" And I was like, "Bro,
Like,
I've
let me
been
sit
waiting
you
for
down.
this
Let me
day."
pull out the big book of everything.
Now, have they tried it yet? No, I've eaten most of it. But
You love to see it.
Oh man.
You love to see it. Yeah, no, I'm not a huge fan of mint in general, but I do like chocolate chip ice cream and like anything else. But that's great to hear.
See,
It's
and
very
then
good
there's
to
my
hear.
son who will just straight up like find mint in the garden and just eat it.
oh yeah.
Oh man, you love to see it.
I do. He's
All
a
right.
funny kid. But I believe
So we're
we're here
talking
to talk
about-
about we are here to talk about Pokemon Warpath.
Yes, and I binged both chapters today, which took me like 2 hours of reading, which honestly surprised me.
Yeah, like it was
Oh, man.
did it feel like it was a drag to get through, or were you surprised at the fact that it took 2 hours to get that much in?
Yes and no. Well, I mean, obviously, I was trying to speed through it just so I could like get ready. I'm like, oh man, I forgot that today's Thursday. I need to read through this. So there was that aspect of it, but it was still very fun to read, and I have like two pages of notes, but like about both chapters 2 and 3. Like I know that we're here talking about chapter 3, but I hadn't read chapter 2 until then, so I'm like, I might as well.
I mean, yeah, if you want
notes of
to
this.
do some quick stuff on chapter 2, we can do that.
Sure, yeah. I'm just gonna like just rapid fire these because like I want
Yeah.
to focus on chapter 3 more than chapter 2.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say something else. I can't even remember what I was. Oh yeah, another thing I want to know, but I just find this is interesting. But the document you sent me for chapter 3, I physically could not read it because it was single spaced, and that was really hard on my eyes.
Oh
and
no,
so
I'm sorry.
gonna read no, it's all right because I was able to change it to double space, and then because it's double space, it comes out to 36 pages of double spaced writing, which I just think is so funny.
Oh my goodness.
Because I think it was originally like 18 pages, but then like, okay, I'm gonna double space this to make it easier to read. Next thing I know, it's like 36
I'm gonna
pages.
pull it up on my computer and figure out how many Let's see how much is this? Let's see on.
I'm on my Google Words. It says 11,428. That's what I'm getting.
Okay, yeah, you're right. It's 18 pages. I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. And then here I am writing like my own Ace Attorney story where like it's averaging out to like 7 pages a chapter. And I'm like, okay.
I remember those days. I remember when I used to be able to cram everything I wanted into like 7 pages. Now I'm just like now I just like words too much and I can't do it.
Yeah, and here I am trying to like figure out like how can I make this word interesting for my own story. I might talk about it later, but I'm not going to focus on that because I'm here to talk about your story.
All right.
So let's go ahead and do it. So I'm just going to rapid fire through chapter 2.
Okay.
The very first note I have is it's not important to the story, but I was listening to Pokemon Legends Arceus quiet music to help with the feudal ambiance, which I just thought was interesting because again, which honestly is a great game if you haven't played it already, and I think would really be
but
cool.
I have it on my to-do list eventually.
I think it would really. I don't know if it would like help your story, but it does have a very good feudal Japan because
I am gonna make use of a little bit of the lore that appears in the game.
Okay, then yeah, I would recommend it because it's a very fun game. I will say that it's very, very fun.
All right.
Couple of other notes, like I wrote so much, I'm not going to go through all of them, but
yeah.
And I mentioned this in the Discord the other day, or not the other day, but earlier today. It was like, oddly enough, Keihatsu. I wrote Keihatsu. I just call him K because it's easier. K seems a lot like Kai. Don't know if that's intentional or simply because of the writer. And I made a meme about that in the group chat earlier. It's like, here, I'm just gonna pull it up and read it exactly. I know that we don't have any visuals, but I'm like that.
There's a character later on.
Wait, what?
There's a character later on down the line who calls him K, so that's kind of funny you say that.
Yeah.
Okay. Mataris, this is a character that tries to hide their negative emotions but gets really intense. Mataris, this is the 7th week in a row you've shown a character that tries to hide their negative emotions but gets really intense in class.
Yep. Yeah.
Which honestly, see, here's the thing, and I can't really. I mean, yes, I tease you about it, but I'm literally in writing my Ace Attorney story. There's like a very similar thing to my original. Sword Art Online character, like a very specific plot point. I'm like, this is exactly the same. Do I care? Not really. So, but yeah. So that was another note that I found funny.
I mean, I'm trying to diversify my characters, but there's always going to be some similarity or another.
Yeah.
Because it's me, right?
And another thing is that I do really like the characterization of Oichi, and I see that a lot in like especially chapters 2, and even more so in chapter 3, which I will cover. Yeah. And I just really like her. She has a certain subtleness in the way that she's written and the way that she presents herself, and even more of like a genuineness.
Yeah.
And then I have a very small note here that was originally for my eyes only. I don't know if I'm going to say it here on the stream, but.
Oh, okay.
I'm just for laughs and giggles.
Okay.
Like verbatim, I do really like the characterization of Oichi, more so her subtleness and even more so her genuineness. Just don't know why. And then I have in parentheses, maybe it's because that's what I want in a potential partner.
Oh, there you go.
Oh man. But you love to see it.
But
anyways,
yeah, like Becca and I've talked a couple of times, like when we were growing up, it was like who's your first crush? And I was like, I didn't really have very many like movie crushes. I had cartoon crushes.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And my cartoon crush was Raven from Teen Titans.
Oh, okay, interesting. I can see that.
And you usually apologize I usually apologize to him. I'm sorry, you got Starfire.
Starfire's pretty great. Starfire's pretty great.
I don't even know if I had any cartoon crushes at the time because I felt like I was significantly more sheltered as a kid than I am now.
Drake the American Dragon.
Drake the American Dragon. That's right. That's yours.
Oh, nice. Dante Basco.
Yep.
Oh man, but yeah, I don't even know if I had any cartoon crushes, or if I did, then I don't. The closest thing I'm gonna say is like Misty from Pokemon, but I don't even know if like that counts because I don't know.
I mean, that's a cartoon. I mean, by American standards, that's a cartoon, I guess.
Well, let me phrase it. I don't know if that counts as a crush for me because I wasn't like, oh man, Misty's so pretty or anything like that. I'm like, oh hey, Misty's cool. But yeah, anyways, I do like the characterization of Oichi, and I'll get more into that in my chapter 3 notes.
Yeah.
Overall, I do like the small details that contribute to the background. It's hard for me to personally write those without seeming overbearing / getting sidetracked. And you mentioned this earlier, like, oh yeah, I really like to write words and stuff like that, which again, why I wrote this note is very, you do it in a way that's interesting. And it is still, it's still a lot, like again, because like 18 pages of chapter 3, But I do really think I like that. It's I like how you do it.
Okay, cool. Like as long
And
like
then
I don't think there's anything wrong with having an 18-page chapter as long as it's like full of stuff that moves the plot forward.
yeah, which is normally not the case for Your Hero Academia.
You know what? We're not here to talk about Your Hero Academia, and you haven't read the last couple chapters. So you know what?
You know what? Yeah, that's right. Because I have been trying to do other stuff at the moment.
That is okay.
What could possibly be more important than reading about your favorite not dead hero?
Reading.
Don't
about
answer that.
Okay. And then I just have like a facetious joke note. Man, if only getting a good job was as easy in this day and age as Oichi being offered the position of a confidant.
I know, right?
I know, it's so sometimes you just gotta go in the streets of a warlord and just accidentally bump into him, and next thing you know, you're basically set for life.
Yeah,
But
basically.
anyways.
Again, like in the game, it's just kind of like she shows up and randomly decides to help you. I was like,
Yeah.
I was like, there's only so much I can do with that. I like to think that I made it at least somewhat more plausible that she's tagging along with him in this situation.
Yeah, no, and again, I mentioned this in like the first podcast, but I did really like how you did that, and it was very. And again, going back to her characterization, because like I don't know how many people have played the game that are listening or reading your story.
Yeah.
I know why everything is the way that it is in your story, but it's again, I just love.
Do you think I'm like keeping it ambiguous enough?
Yes, I do.
For someone who someone who doesn't know what's going on.
I would say yes, and it would be. It's one of those things where like I don't think that there's two kinds of twists. There's the twist that absolutely nobody could see coming but still work. Well, like there's three kinds of twists. The ones that where nobody sees coming and does not work.
Yeah.
The one where somebody doesn't see anything coming and it does work.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third twist, which would more apply to me in this case, the one where you do see what's coming, but it's not about the twist itself. It's about how it's executed.
Okay.
And
so like
I do really like that with.
Like, sorry. Finish what you were saying. I'll ask in a second.
Sure, yeah, no, and it's just like the idea of like, oh yeah, it's not really a mystery or anything like that, but it's really fun and it's really well written. Just seeing that and just like seeing all these little details about it.
Yeah. Okay.
And a good. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. My bad.
Yeah, and I was gonna say a good example of like where it's not really a twist, like it's a twist but it's obvious would be like in the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Have you seen that?
Mm-hmm.
I love that. It's a great movie, but you know that Judge Doom is the bad guy. You know that's him, but it's done in such a way that he is such a fun character to watch, and even like the twist of him being a toon is like so out there, but you know he's the bad guy, but it's done in a really well written way.
Yeah.
That's like it's obvious, sure, but still fun to see this.
In terms of like an unpredictable twist that worked, I like to use my own work as an example. I think the best case that I've done for that was when I had Crimson be the final boss for my Shattered Fragment story. Do you remember that?
It's been so long since I've read that. Was Crimson the final boss in that?
Crimson became the final boss.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Like refresh me on that. Like what was
what happened?
Because I know he was killed at some point.
So Crimson died during the final Red Player raid when they wiped out Laughing Coffin.
Yeah.
And so later on they took out and like they kind of kept an eye out for him to like respawn in the hollow area because they thought that might happen because they'd seen that kind of thing happen before. It never happened. They killed Heathcliff and they thought they were going to get out, but the Cardinal system kind of pulled a switcheroo on them and spawned a new boss. And basically, because of Mataris' data and the way that he was able to employ all his skills, the Cardinal system deemed him as the biggest threat, essentially.
Okay.
That would be the most difficult to overcome. So it generated the final boss as Crimson.
Sure.
And because he
it's been so long since I've read
because he needed all the experiences and everything that made him who he was, he kept his memories and the like.
Sure.
But I remember dropping hints throughout like for a few chapters leading up to it. Like I was dropping little hints here and there that when the chapter dropped, there were a few people who were like, I didn't see it coming, but now in looking back on these chapters, it makes sense.
Okay, yeah. Again, it's been so long. I remember like thinking like, and I will stand by this. I think Shattered Fragment is your best version of the Red Swordsman SAO stories.
Oh, absolutely, 1,000%.
Yeah, there are other aspects of the other stories that I do genuinely enjoy more
Yeah.
But as a collective, I think
The
Shattered
execution
Fragments are
leaves
best
the
attempt at
execution
that, yeah.
leaves something to be desired. For the other
But
ones.
with that, take away that one opening chapter where it's like I mean, yeah, like overall it's great, but it's just
Yeah.
Mataris the Red Swordsman being, edgy.
Yeah.
I
mean,
man, the problem was here.
oh man,
Be like,
if you hate Mataris the Red
quotes.
Swordsman being edgy, you're never mind, man. You're not gonna like the newest Your Hero chapter.
You love to see it
Because Mataris is red swordsmaning like you have not seen in a while.
Sure. There are two more notes about Chapter 2 that I do want to throw in here because I do think that they are interesting thought experiments. Well, actually, no, the second one is more so a thought experiment. The first one is like a lot more important. You mentioned the entire airship, and yeah, I know that it's like a little it's never mentioned in the game, but you do see the animation for it.
Yeah.
But in your story, it's never really described, and it doesn't need to be like anything major, but like I didn't even know like what it was. Like, okay, is this like an actual like functioning motor airship? Is it powered by flying Pokemon? Because like this is still a feudal Japan, so I don't really know what this is.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I mentioned it in this chapter or if it comes in like one of the ones that's coming soon, but they talk about how they figured out how to do airships by like studying the Porygon Pokemon.
Okay. Yeah, because like I was thrown because like again, Pokemon is always like the world of Pokemon has always had super advanced technology, but even here it's feudal era, and I was just like, what the heck is this?
Yeah, I thought about whether or not to include the airship, but it is a function in the game, so I was like, all right, I can figure out a way to make this work.
Yeah, and even like further,
like I didn't want to go too much into detail of explaining it like right away because to these characters, it's just a normal part of their world. They don't stop and marvel at it. That's just like, this is if we need to have a large number of troops moved, this is what we use. Let's go.
Okay, because that brings me to my follow-up. Like, why would you not always use the airship instead of like just walking like a week to the border or something like that? Just because it just seems like a lot more. I don't know. It like I like what you're doing with it collectively, but in the context of chapters 2 and 3, it just came off as like really, like you know what I mean?
Okay. All right.
Like that's like again, it's not a problem, but it's like again like feudal Japan era-esque, and like all of a sudden there's this airship that's not explained in either chapters 2 or 3 where it exists.
Okay, fair enough.
And then the second one is more of like a thought experiment that I had, but like in hearing about Keihatsu's backstory about, especially with like his mother and the concubines and like how they offed each other for political power, that just got me thinking like, oh, and I just have this thought written down. What if there was something akin to a Skyrim Dark Brotherhood or Laughing Coffin contract killer group in the world of Ronsei? It was just a thought experiment I came up with.
I'd hold on to that thought.
Okay, I didn't know if that was something you had planned, but I'm like, okay, that would actually work really well in a lot of instances, and I would love to see that maybe fleshed out.
You're not wrong.
Okay. And like and follow up, why didn't the concubines just like, hey, why don't you kill the person? And they're like, and they go up to like, the Lord Arceus has ordered the sinners dead in the form of a lady who pays $50.
Well, this isn't exactly a comedy, so
I know, but like this, but still, like the same but still,
the
like why didn't they
is there.
hire like the contract?
I'll go more into this at another time, but like those two concubines in particular were not the brightest.
Okay, interesting. Well, I mean, that would, I'll accept that.
Yeah.
But just the idea of like a contract killer assassins group, I think would like work really well. And based on what you're saying, it sounds like you do have something lined up in that avenue.
Oh yeah, 100%.
And overall, it was a good chapter to read. I enjoyed it, especially the instances with Oichi. Those are probably my favorite because again, I like her character for no reason that I have stated during this podcast. Anyways.
Fair enough.
Oh no. So that was just. I say rapid fire of chapter 2, but I don't even know how long this has been, so I don't even know how long.
That went for like 10 minutes, so it's not bad.
Oh, okay, great, awesome.
All right, so chapter 3 is the one that we were working on.
Yeah, I know, which was the first one that had actual battles in, which I will get to. But I don't know how I should do this. I don't know if I should just go down my notes because I feel like that's really one-sided. I kind of hope to open up discussion, but it's just I don't know.
I mean, you can start with the note. You can start with your notes, and then we can go from there.
Sure,
Like,
yeah. Well, the very first note I have written down is just the word progeny. And I don't have anything else listed there, just progeny in quotations.
Uh-huh.
I think what my mind says like, that's a big word right there, progeny. There's a lot of big words that are being used here. Feels like almost like the Dr. Doofenshmirtz moment. Like, I wrote big laundry right here on my thing, and I have no idea why I wrote that. I just wrote big laundry. Just hoped I remembered it.
So Becca actually brought this up when I was reading it to her recently, was that she noticed that whenever Keihatsu is talking to other people, like most of the time when he's talking, he speaks very formally. He uses a little bit more of an elegant dictionary kind of thing. But whenever he talks to Oichi and it's just the two of them, you'll start noticing that his dialogue becomes a little bit more relaxed, and his speech is somewhat less formal.
Yeah, and that's a good detail, and I do really like that. And that actually kind of brings me to my next note that I have written down, which is like what you brought up like early on in chapter 3, like page 3 or 4, something like that. An interesting take on the idea of personal connections, both between Oichi's own parents and that of Keihatsu's father, and how that connection was more so in Keihatsu's case, but it was more of a respect relationship than a love-based relationship, and I just thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, like so one of the things that makes Keihatsu so different from any of the other characters that I've done is that all the characters that I've done before, like they had a good relationship with their dad. Okay. Like even with Goran from Sandtail, like even though he left,
which I never read.
Okay, well. That like he ran away from his family essentially, but his mom and dad found him, and like they didn't hold any like they understood why he left the situation that he did, so their relationship remained good. And even in the cases of characters where like the parents have died, the character remembers their parents fondly, they respect them. This is kind of the first time where I've taken it in an aspect of like he respects his father, or more like he respects the Warlord. But he's not entirely sure how he feels about his father.
Okay, because I do think that's really interesting, and I did like reading about that. And
okay, cool, yeah. Like it's a very new, like to me. Sorry, it's not a new concept. To me, it's a new concept to work on.
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm like, this has to be a very complicated relationship.
Sure. Yeah. No, I can imagine.
And I think this is interesting to me because. You've always written these characters with these pretty strong family foundations. And that's always been really foreign and alien and weird to me. And then this guy, I'm like, oh yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Really?
Respect the fact that he's your father, but other than that, there's zero respect for that guy. Yeah, pretty much.
Huh, that's interesting. So like, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to ask about personal life stuff, but I just think that's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, that one, to me, I'm like, oh yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool.
So you relate to Keihatsu?
Oh, 100%. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Like without going too much into it, like.
Yeah, no, of course.
There's a lot of like abuse and drug use and like mental health issues and like just prison history in my family, and it's just you can. I think a lot of times we see things black and white.
Yeah.
And. There's a lot of things about my upbringing and my family that I respect and love, but there's a lot of things that I absolutely am disgusted by and frustrated by and hurt by, right? And so for me, it's like, yeah, I get Keihatsu's like personally, he has no idea, it's like I get what it is to personally not have any idea how you feel about your parents, but also like appreciate certain things about them.
Yeah.
So like to me, I was like, oh yeah, this is a protagonist I get.
Okay.
And then the girl, usually I relate to the girl. The girl, I'm just like, okay, whatever, yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Like, I get some of her points, but I'm like, yeah, like, I don't really relate to her as much as I've related to other, like, leading ladies that you've written, so.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. All right, and that kind of brings me into, like, the next point. Like, in that same discussion that Keihatsu and Oichi have, that made me think of something specifically. Yeah. Are either of you familiar with Charlie Chaplin's film The Great Dictator by any chance?
Yes.
I unfortunately am not.
Oh my word, Mataris. I know I say like watch a lot of things, and most of the time facetiously. I say that facetiously most of the time, but I do genuinely mean it when I say that I do think you should watch The Great Dictator. Because not only is it like really funny, like it's held up comedy wise like for literally over 100 years, but it's so relevant in a lot of ways, especially today, and especially the great speech that Charlie Chaplin's character, the Jewish barber who's mistaken as Hinkle,
it's
parody
the
stand-in
Prince and
for
the Pauper, but with Hitler.
Yeah, basically.
And a Jewish guy.
Anyways, the point is, it's a very good film. But anyways, the reason I bring that up is because Keihatsu mentions like the idea of like, oh, I wonder if it would have been better to have not known my mom's love and be unloved and be practical about everything. And that made me remember like a specific quote from Charlie Chaplin's great speech at the end of The Great Dictator, which is like, quote, "Only the unloved hate the unloved and the unnatural," end quote. And Again, it's a phenomenal movie. And you can find it on YouTube for free.
I'm gonna have to,
for sure.
I'm
you should watch it.
I'm gonna have to check that one out.
It is my favorite Charlie Chaplin film. Like I've seen a lot of Charlie Chaplin films because I was, partially raised by grandparents, obviously, because of like the troubled past and like in and out of different households, and being partially raised by grandparents, you see all the silent films. You see like you're on Turner Classic Movies from sun up till sundown. Like that's what's playing in the background. And so so I've seen a lot of Charlie Chaplin. That is by far my favorite Charlie Chaplin film.
Same. It is so like it's not only is it like good in terms of like drama, but it's also just funny. It's just a funny movie.
It's hilarious. It makes you laugh and it makes you cry, and it's just
it does.
Beautiful.
It's so, and you can find it on YouTube for free. Go and watch it. That's like if there was one movie that was not Moana that I said, hey, you need to watch unironically, unfacetiously, without any kind of joke in my voice, it's Great Dictator.
Okay,
like I'm just saying that.
Yeah. No,
but anyways, I just thought of that quote like while I was reading that, and I just wanted to bring that up just because I thought that was interesting.
That's good. I mean, I'm glad that like, how do I put this? Like, I'm glad to hear that. Even not knowing this work personally, Charlie Chaplin is considered one of the greatest writers. He
is one of the greatest filmmakers of all time.
He's one of the greatest.
Yes,
he was the filmmaker. That was what he was known for, is being the filmmaker.
Yeah.
Like to hear that, like my work is reminding you of that quality of media, of entertainment content. That's something very nice for me to hear. So
that's good to hear, because now I'm going to bash your teeth in.
All right, let's do it.
No, I'm just joking, because actually I have a lot of positive things. I don't have a whole lot of negative things to say. Part of the reason is because like I wasn't really looking to critique it. I was just reading it and just kind of writing down my thoughts of what I
stood
thought
out to
chapter.
you,
Yeah. My thoughts are very jumbled, and I just had like a Google Doc open while I was reading it, and that's where I wrote down all my notes. But anyways, moving on. Chiyo. She was an enjoyable character to read, and her very first interaction with Keihatsu is like, "Oh man, I deserve punishment" or something like that. It reminded me of like the YouTuber Caleb City's video about like supervillains disposing henchmen easily.
I think you showed me that at one point.
Like he kills like the last person who's like beat up by the hero. It's like Gerald or whatever his generous name is. Like, yeah, call in the reinforcements. Those were the reinforcements. I'm sorry. That was the last guy. Anyone who does anything even remotely wrong, you just kill him. How is this effective? Well, if the person can't get the job done, somebody else will. Yeah, but that's the thing. Who? That was the last guy we had on our side. We literally only have enemies now.
The public school system and EAs.
Oh my goodness.
Drop mic.
Oh, and I'm gonna like send the video like in the group Discord later, just because I think it's so funny, and it especially plays like this kind of story with like warlords.
That guy's always funny.
I will send the video to the group chat after this because it's. But anyways, I just thought, I do like Chiyo, and I did like a lot of her interactions, and I don't know if this is gonna come up in a later chapter, but I genuinely thought like her Wigglytuff would like have some role to play in the Jigglypuff that would become Oichi's, presumably. I don't know. I would be pretty confident in saying that you'd keep that in the story, but who knows? Maybe you're just not giving her a Pokemon the entire story. I don't know.
I mean, wait and see.
Yeah. Had to adjust double space formatting at this point in reading to make it easy on the eyes. That's just what I wrote down. And then it's not really a critique on the story or anything, but I just thought it was interesting. A quote about like when Oichi was like helping the infirmary. Quote, claw marks that were brought about by a vicious Blaziken. And the only thing I could think of is like, wouldn't there be more broken bones or physical bruises because Blaziken's known for kicking more so? I don't know. That was just like a thing that stood out to me.
I mean, it was what was the guy bonded to? It was an Ursaring, right?
Let me.
That's right. Okay. So this is actually something that I ended up having to change because I changed
right
this.
here.
Yeah. So for you, it read Zangoose, and that was a mistake because I wrote that this person was suffering from poison attacks. Zangoose can't get poisoned.
Oh.
Their ability essentially nullifies poisoning, or it just makes them stronger. So I realized that doesn't work right. So I changed it to an Ursaring.
Yeah, it's right here. It says Blaziken in the version you sent me.
No. The Blaziken was the attacking Pokemon. The Pokemon in person that were attacked. So the Pokemon that was attacked was originally a Zangoose. I changed it to an Ursaring to keep continuity.
No, but my point is that they're saying they got the injuries from a Blaziken.
Yeah.
And the Blaziken is mainly like a kicking kind of Pokemon.
That's a good point, but again, I
don't know. Again, it was a very nitpicky thing, but it's something that stood out to me.
Like if it had been a Zangoose, I would have definitely been like, oh yeah, you're right. But because I changed it to an Ursaring, like Ursaring's a big, bulky Pokemon. Like Blaziken can kick the heck out of it. It's still not going to do the same amount of damage as it would to like a smaller creature, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no.
It's interesting. It's going to be a very interesting challenge. Like maintaining, certain types of attacks are super effective. They'll do more of this kind of damage or whatever. But I'm also trying to keep in account like the physicality of these Pokemon and these creatures.
Sure, and I do like the way I'm gonna talk about when I get to that point in my notes. But I do like what you did a lot with like how you did the battle system here.
Yeah.
And then I mentioned this earlier in the Discord, but like upon hearing that his scout was, you know what? Here, I'm just gonna send you a meme that I made for this specific moment. Nobody else can see it, but I'm gonna show it to you anyway. Send it to you anyways.
Okay.
Here, let me go ahead and send that because I think it's funny.
Oh, boy,
there we go. I just sent it.
What did you do?
Because nobody can see it, I will say it out loud. When a group of Charizard riding warriors kills one of your scouts, but you can't show any rage on your face, and it's just the Arthur Fist meme.
Yep.
Because that's immediately what I thought of when I read that. It was just, I don't know, I just love the Arthur Fist. Arthur's one of those shows I didn't watch a whole lot as a kid, like compared to Magic School Bus, but it has some of the most memeable content.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Like, unironically.
I've read more Arthur books than I've watched because I was genuinely not allowed to watch Arthur because DW was disrespectful.
Oh, she was the worst.
Yeah. So my mom wouldn't let me watch the show because of DW. And so it was funny though because my kids have all of Joe's old Arthur books.
Yep.
So I've experienced more Arthur through those books than I did.
It's kind of funny that you say that because every time that I visited my grandparents, who honestly are like visiting us right now, which I just think is the funniest coincidence. But every time I visited my grandparents, my grandpa would always read us books as to go to bed, and most of those were like a lot of different Arthur books, which I do think is funny because it's I remember so many of the Arthur stories, and it was just so fun. I just think that's a huge coincidence right there.
Like Arthur was like what the Arthur books and Dr. Seuss were like a lot of how I taught myself to read.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well. Real quick, moving on in my notes. I think I mentioned this earlier, but I do really like the little detail that Oichi is a skilled mediciner. Yes. And I don't know. I just like more. I like characterization, and that's a great little bit of characterization.
Well, like one of her, like in the game, like her healing ability, like especially after she awakens, is like broken.
Is it?
After she awakens. Her ability is like full heal, status removal, like everything off of everybody across the board.
Let me rephrase that. I think the first time I played Pokemon Conquest, I only did the standard story mode. And because of that, in the standard story mode, the only one who ever awakens is your main character.
Yes.
So I didn't get that far. I want to go back and play it again, but that would require me playing the entire game because I got a new PC between me playing that and now.
Oh no!
And I would have to go through everything over again.
Including
and as much as I
Nobunaga's
did
Castle,
as much as I did enjoy the game, and I do want to experience more of the stories, it's going to be a while for me before I play that again. Just because it was such a time-consuming game. Like I love it. I really do, but it was a lot, and that was just for the main one story out of
there's
what,
15? there's 36 post-story campaigns.
Oh my!
To be fair, most of them are like you conquer like 8 kingdoms instead of 17, or some of them is just like straight up 4 kingdoms.
Okay, yeah, because I do like
only a handful of them do you conquer the entire continent again.
Yeah, but I do. I haven't. But I do want to play it a lot more at some point, and I even might write my own little. I might do what I did with like Your Hero Academia and Doctor Who, and write like a one shot of like that takes place in the Warpath storyline, because there's this one idea that I really want to use, and a part of me really wanted to do, like when you're doing your like, oh hey, the winner of the raffle will get the winner of who finds the stupid thing first in my Instagram, even though I scroll through the entire thing, will have a story in it. No hard feelings, Joe Clone. I know you're listening, Joe Clone. No hard feelings, but I did have a character idea that will never see the light of day unless I write it myself now. But I might just do that. But anyways, moving on. I just have a note here. A Chandelure and didn't even flinch at Hyper Beam. This is a based warrior. Because Chandelure is one of my absolute favorite Pokemon, and so the fact that you include that is just so. I'm like, okay. At first it was like Chandelure, base warrior, but then like didn't even finish a Hyper Beam, based warrior.
Okay, so fun fact: I actually thought about having Keihatsu tell his guy to blast the Chandelure for one reason, because he knew it wouldn't do anything to him. Hyper Beam is a normal type move.
Yeah,
it wouldn't do anything. It wouldn't do anything to the Chandelure if it hit him directly. But I was like, okay, I was like,
it'll make him seem like an idiot.
I'm like, that goes against 2 things. One, it goes against his character. He's not the type to preemptively strike. And 2, it would just be a really petty move, and he's kind of like he's above that.
Okay,
he's doing his best to de-escalate the situation as much as he can.
Okay, I mean, yeah.
Like in his own way, like he's. He's hoping that maybe a show of force will be like, all right, maybe this is a bad idea, maybe we back off.
Sure.
But to have him attack him directly unprompted, that would go against his character too much.
At the same time, I feel like maybe like the Warlord, I forget his name, I didn't write it down. He'd be like, you are a fool because the normal type moves don't affect ghost type moves. Therefore, you are dumb and I will attack you now.
He wasn't Kanbei is not the Warlord. He's one of the Vice Warlords.
I know, but like the point I made still stands,
Yeah.
Because like, okay. But anyways, and then this is an interesting note that I wrote down, because I'm like, I wonder if this was intended or not. So he says, so they then say, I don't even know what the exact phrase is. They say some Latin phrase which translates to like, I think my country, my church,
for God,
my
for country, for family.
And I looked that up, and then I saw that I saw the translation, but then I also saw it take me to a school that is in Red Hill, Australia. And then I'm like, is this something that, because I know that you spend a lot of time in Australia.
You found my school.
Okay, great.
That's our that was our motto.
All right, because I was curious about, because like it just directly took me to there. I'm like, is this a school that he went to? Which I thought was the school. That is cool.
Yep, Canberra Grammar School. That was our motto.
All right, yeah, that's really cool. So I just wrote down like,
yeah, I want it. Like, it's such a cool motto, and like I finally I was writing the opening scenes for this story, and I was like, wait a minute, I finally have a reason to use this, and it doesn't sound stupid.
Oh man, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, no, because like because I saw them like, I just wrote down my notes, Australian school reference, because yeah.
Really cool. You literally found my school.
Oh man, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then my next note that I have is like, and this is where I talk about the actual battles and tactics.
Yeah.
And I do really like a lot of how you did utilize like a lot of those like actual in-game Pokemon strategies. Like Rain Dance into Thunderbolt or Thunder, or whichever one. I do love a lot of that. And especially like there's a moment like where you bring up Toxic and then the use of Facade, which then in game has double damage against any Pokemon with the status condition.
Yep.
Or I don't know if it's status or just poison. I want to say it's any status condition.
It's status condition.
Okay, I was right. But yeah, no, I do like a lot of that because like as much as I do like the anime and you do see a lot of cool tactics that you only can see in the anime.
Yeah.
Like say like, oh yeah, and like the first episode of X and Y, Pikachu uses Iron Tail, but then Bunnelby catches it with his ears. Like, I caught your thing. He's like, well, now you can't use your ears, so now you can't move anymore. And Electro Ball and stuff like that is very cool. Don't get me wrong. But then you have stuff like this where you actually utilize game mechanics, and it makes sense in a feasible way.
Again, I'm really setting a challenge for myself in that I'm trying to stay faithful to the game mechanics while also trying to keep in mind, okay, like how does this look? Like what is it like? How would this actually physically play out if they're not just sprites going at it in a video game?
Putting myself forward as a Pokemon expert who knows a lot about competitive Pokemon battling. If you need a second or third opinion, since Becca's probably giving you the second opinion. Oh man. But anyways, and then there's two other notes that I really wanted to note. The first one was like I accidentally misread something. I thought it was saying one thing, but then I realized it wasn't. But then it made me think about what if. And basically that note is like, all I can think about now is what if there were actual Pokemon that wore armor or something similar. That's the only thing I can think about now. And I don't know, I don't know if you have anything, if you thought of that and if you have that plan later on. Armored Pokemon just sounds really cool now.
I did think about that. And maybe I'll have some Pokemon that show up like that. But honestly, I feel like for the most part, it would be kind of like how Meowth talks. It's like some
Pokemon. It's like a rarity.
Yeah, where it's like because for the most part, Pokemon are animals, and like and like
but you put armor on horses.
Yeah, you put armor on horses, but I can bet you they don't like it.
Yeah.
And if a horse had the ability to light you on fire while you're trying to saddle it up and put armor on it, I'm pretty sure it would.
Not with that attitude.
I mean, my point is like these are creatures with superpowers, but they're still animals.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I need like obviously there will be some concessions made because of the way they interact with people, but I try to keep in mind the fact like they are still animals. They're going to act like animals.
Sure. Yeah. And then another thing that I was thinking of while I was reading this, and granted this entire, not even like this story on its own, but just the idea of Pokemon conquest as a whole, it weirdly reminds me of like the conquest of Israel in the time of Moses and Joshua from the Bible scriptures, and even a bit of like David's time, where entire point there was like, and the best example of this would be Jericho. I mean, granted, you could see it like literally scattered everywhere in the Old Testament of like the Lord saying, "Go and conquer this nation." Yeah. And granted, like it was a lot more of like, do not let anyone live because of reasons that are clearly stated in the Bible. And when they don't follow that rule, they have massive repercussions. Yeah. But I just thought that was a very interesting choice. And granted, like there is a lot more of a merciful side for Keihatsu, and these are vastly different circumstances than what happened in the Bible. I do want to throw that out there. Yeah. But I did find it interesting how that, I don't know, it was just a comparison that I thought was interesting, and I just wrote down in my notes. Yeah. And I don't know.
So you don't like that he let them go, or
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it's interesting because the context of what's happening in this story is very different from the context of what's happening in the Bible. Yeah. Because he was very clear, like, destroy all your enemies. If you don't, then they will basically bring rise to false worshippers. Yeah. And stuff like that. And I don't know. I thought it was an interesting comparison. I'm not saying that what Keihatsu is doing, like in letting them go, is right or wrong. Yeah. I'm going to err on the side of caution, but I just thought it was an interesting comparison that just popped in my mind. Yeah. And I didn't know if like you wanted to, if you had any thoughts on that specifically, or if that was just something I was going to say, or.
I mean, part of what it was is like to put it in layman's terms, he was kind of flexing. He was like
Keihatsu was.
Keihatsu. He's like, I could have snuffed all of you, but I chose not to.
Okay. Weird flex, but okay.
Yeah, exactly. But like that, he.
Oh man.
mean, like this is to kind of show like he's different from other warlords, not just because he inherited the throne. Like most warlords, they get the throne by combat.
Sure.
He got it because his dad died. That already makes him different. I wanted to I like part of this was like I want people to understand that he's different, not just because of the circumstances that led him to getting the throne, but also because of who he is as a person.
Sure, yeah, of course.
Yeah. I mean,
All
like most of my other characters that I've written would have been like, yeah, go ahead, take their heads off. Let's like it's like
Let's
some
unalive them.
Some of them would have done it gladly. Others would have been just like, nah, they'll become a threat if we let them go.
Kingdom of Ignis, you have failed Ransei.
Basically.
Oh my word. I'm sorry. I do like your Shattered Fragment, but I will stand by that version of Mataris the Red Swordsman is probably my least favorite, simply because I mean, obviously I still have a certain soft spot for him, and I do like him in a lot of ways, but it just got to a point where I just hate the guy for a plethora of different reasons.
I mean, he's not supposed to be likable. He's insane.
No, I get that. No, that's the point. That is the point. It's kind of the same way like how I hate Azula. Like in terms of writing, she's very well written. I still hate her. I can't really respectfully, I can't say that Mataris the Red Swordsman is nearly as well written.
No, I don't disagree. I don't disagree.
And he is very, very like I like Edge. I have made that very clear in the Discord. But Mataris the Red Swordsman is on a different level than I am.
Okay.
That's what. But anyways, I just thought that I just wanted to bring that up. I just thought that was interesting.
No. That's fine. How did you like the reveal that it's like anything that happens to the Pokemon happens to the warrior?
Well, I mean, I already knew that going in, partially because I was already asking a lot of questions about it.
Yeah.
So I guess with that in mind, I can't really give an unbiased view.
Fair enough.
But I did like that. Like the situation where that mainly happens is the Thunderstrike maneuver, just for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah.
Where they instantly kill like all of the Charizard people.
Yeah.
Because times 4 no, it's not times 4, it's just times 2 weakness.
Yeah.
Because
it's times 2 weakness, but it was going to be a very accurate attack, which can make the difference.
But I did think it was interesting, like how it even mentions like let me see if I can find the part of it. I don't even know. Because I have the story. Oh yeah, Keihatsu briefly shut his eyes against the dying cries of the enemy forces, but then he hardened his heart. The invaders made his people suffer, and as protector of the realm, he could not stand for it, no matter how unpleasant he found the ordeal. Yeah. So in that sense, I do really like what you did. Because again, like how do you even live with your like? Granted, there's like a difference between a warlord and a civilian, obviously, but like how do you even comprehend that? In a certain aspect,
that he just basically snapped his fingers and killed half a dozen people.
Yeah, because that's basically like the equivalent of like the one person who pressed the button that fired the Death Star laser. How do you come to terms with that?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I just have a lot of.
That's gonna be part of the story. That's gonna be part of the story because obviously this isn't gonna be the only conflict that happens.
Yeah. No, and I do like, and that's brought up later. I'll reference it in my notes because I wrote it down, specifically. But I don't know, because there's a lot you could think. Because like wait, you guys don't have Netflix, do you?
Not anymore.
No, because I was watching the Avatar live action, and I'm not going to go too much on that because I'm not here to talk about it. First of all, it's a good show. It's obviously nowhere near as god tier as the original. Show. I respectfully disagree.
All right, we'll get into it about it. We'll get into that later. I have way too many reasons to hate that show.
The reason I bring it up is because one of the adaptation changes they made is that King Boomy is very, very worn down from being one of the very few people who has not only lived through the war, but has been making literally life-changing and death-deciding decisions. And you can see that it's worn him down. Like, he's still, like, obviously very funny and, like, has his sense of humor. But you can see, like, in certain areas that he is very worn down by the pressure of those kinds of choices.
Yeah.
And I see that a lot in, like, again, here in the story.
Okay.
And I don't know. That's the reason I bring it up. I still think it's a good show. Not here to talk about it. We can talk about it later. But, but anyways. And then like immediately in the next line that I just referenced, Squadrons A through D move out, and then in my notes I have Squad F, for heck's sake, stop playing Bejeweled. Oh man,
I love that show.
So for all of you people from the country of Ignis and that one person playing Bejeweled over there, shoot for the stars.
It'll make it more fun when I kick you back into the dirt.
You're not a better kingdom than us.
My sweet ass crown begs to differ.
Dang it, he's got us there.
Oh man. What's funny to me is that like it has taken 3 full chapters to basically cover the prologue of Pokemon Conquest, if you think about it.
I mean, hey, to be fair, like even for a game like Pokemon Conquest, Pokemon has never been such a story-driven game.
This is true.
So I do see like how like making a story-driven game would add a lot more, because like there's, I don't know, but I do like it. I do like that a lot. Okay. And then like my next note that I have,
the exposition doesn't feel overdone or wasteful.
Not to me.
Okay.
I see how it could be for other people. But because this is kind of something that I wanted that wasn't necessarily fluff, but it was more establishing than anything, I personally enjoyed it.
Okay,
although I
cool.
can see, because again, 18 pages single-spaced, 36 pages double-spaced, I can see how someone could possibly drop this. Okay. That's just my personal opinion. It's not what I think, but I see the possibility.
Fair enough. Like, to be fair, though, like, the websites that I post this on, like, it shows how many words are
but it doesn't show the page
in there
number,
before you start reading. So I feel like, if you see the amount of words and you're like, oh, I wanted a long story, I'll go for this, because that's usually what I end up doing. Like if I see a super short story, I'm honestly not as likely to go read it.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, that's what I'm like as well, yeah. Well, not necessarily with like the page, well, I mean, because I don't normally pay attention to the page number, but normally the summaries are a good indicator of how much care is in a story, rather.
Yeah.
And then like I open the first chapter and I scroll down and I see how long it takes me to scroll down. And that's generally a good indicator to me personally. It's like, okay, is this something that I'm going to be reading? And then next thing you know, if you're like me and you're trying to write an Ace Attorney story and then you're trying to see other Ace Attorney stories that are posted on fanfiction, you see that to your horror, one person has like 7 pages, oh, hey, want to move to the next page of list of stories? Has 7-page listings of 500-word stories, all from one person. And that is so saddening to me. And I want to report them, but technically there's nothing wrong with what they're doing.
It's just
I can't.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. But anyways, I'll probably like shamelessly plug in my own story as soon as I'm finished with this, but I'm not finished. So, what's my next note? I did like how you had the POV from the point of view. Sorry, I wrote the abbreviation from Eevee, and I did really like that a lot. And honestly, the factual idea that they would not know the names or typings or even attacks of other Pokemon, which I thought was like a very spot-on detail. Like, obviously, I think that the Pokemon would know certain aspects because, again, like you have trainers calling out like "Do Electro Ball" or stuff like that.
Well, like they know what, like you had Keihatsu telling him like go dig, and he knew what. Well, I mean,
was. Yeah, but that's a self-explanatory move, and then you get into the moves that aren't so specific explanatory.
But he tells him use Toxic, use Facade, and Eevee thinks about it, like his thought process interprets that information through his body differently.
Yeah, but anyways, the reason I bring that up is because, like, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is you trying to make the battles more interesting rather than just seeing it from the point of view of somebody who's essentially standing to the side of it.
Absolutely.
Is that? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I wanted to give it a little bit of a first-person narrative kind of thing.
Yeah, no, and I did really like that. I liked that a lot, and there was something else. I don't know if like further on in this, I think you mentioned this, or I don't know if you did or not, but I don't know if later on in the story, if you're planning to like have the Pokemon battle, but then also like have person-to-person battles at the same time, because that didn't really strike me out as something that was prevalent in this chapter.
No, that's not usually how it works.
Okay, but would that be something like, say, like some just random scenario, like there's warlords obviously, but like say somebody is like trying to pull a sneak dishonorable move, and like while their Pokemon are fighting, they try to get their human partner off guard, and so like it's kind of like this kind of juggling of like, okay, I need to pay attention with my Pokemon, but then there's also this person who's trying to take me down. I don't know.
Pay attention to the water type Warlord when he comes along.
Okay, awesome. And so I don't know. That was just something that I wanted to throw out as well. I did really like the first-person idea of Pokemon, the way that you wrote it, and also I really like the possibility of like Pokemon fighting and then the Warlords fighting. That's what I wanted to throw out there.
Okay.
Because I don't know what you have planned, but I just think that would be like an interesting change of pace as well.
Yeah.
And depending on like their take on like whether it's an honorable thing to do or a dishonorable thing to do, or if it's like Warlord or even like a thief
it's considered
character.
Very dishonorable. It's considered very dishonorable to send your Pokemon at a person. Like that's a bit like in terms of battlefield etiquette, that's a big no-no.
All right, well then just have a character like Zhao or something. I don't know.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like, I'm not saying that because of that it's off the board. You know, obviously there's people who are gonna fight dirty. I'm just saying, like, don't expect it as a main staple going forward.
Okay, shame, but I see what you're saying.
Well, like, again, you have to think. I mean, something you have to think about is like they don't like this is a world that exists with rules outside of the ones that we would consider to be normal.
That is true. That is very true.
It's like, and that's something that I have to catch myself on sometimes because I'm like, well, you know, by our standards, we wouldn't do this or we would do that, and I'm like, oh wait, these aren't our standards. This is the world that I'm in. I have to think about the history that leads to them getting here. So why contextually would they not do this?
Sure. Yeah, of course. I do see what you're saying.
Yeah.
And then like my last note about the battles, like overall I really like the way that you wrote those battles. So I hope that not necessarily more complex, because like the more complex it is, I feel like it'll be a bit more difficult to read.
Yeah.
As opposed to like playing or watching them on an anime. But at the same time, like something that's a bit more than just, you know, I don't know. That's just what I have written in my notes.
No, I understand. So the way that I wrote Eevee when he was like when the battle was from his point of view, I actually took inspiration from Aragon. And I
still never read.
Okay, well, so whenever he writes stuff from the dragon's point of view, like the way that she interprets things around her is very different. Okay. And like the way that her thought process even goes about things is very different. So like anybody who's read like Christopher Paolini's works and reads this, like if they don't already get the reference, I'm sure as soon as they hear me talk about it, they'll be like, "Oh, that's why that seems familiar."
Sure. And ironically enough, like for Christmas, I did get the not the first book of the Aragon series. I got Murtaugh, or however you pronounce his name. And I have never read a single book of the Inheritance Cycle. I saw the movie when I was like 7 years old, but I remember nothing from it. So I read the first few pages and then I was doing something else and I forgot about it, so I might pick it up again. But it's one of those books that's like really intimidating because it's very
very big. Yeah.
It's thick. It's like what's it called? Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix kind of size, but
I can understand.
I do really want to read it, but it's again one of those intimidating things. Kind of like Naruto and One Piece. But hey, the one thing that Murtaugh doesn't have going for it is that it doesn't have a stupid bridge section, so I can.
I mean, you don't know that.
I'm pretty confident
there might be a bridge in there.
If there is a moment of Murtaugh where they spend 5 chapters trying to protect a bridge builder, then I will throw the book against the wall and completely disown the series.
You need to read the Ranger's Apprentice books because the second book is literally called The Burning Bridge.
Okay. You know what? Is that a metaphorical bridge or is it a literal bridge?
It's a literal bridge.
Okay. Thank you.
They like one of the big things is they find a giant bridge and they light it up.
Well, good for them. Anyways, I'm gonna move on to my next note. Otherwise, I'd be here talking about stupid bridges for the rest of the podcast.
All right, let's do it.
The resolution was one that was well written. It felt like there was like with the cards that he dealt, he was given. It was a good answer, but it felt like there was no right answer. It didn't feel like a hollow victory per se, but it certainly wasn't a like Final Fantasy victory music play kind of situation.
Okay.
And I feel like you really encapsulated that really well, especially with Oichi.
Okay.
Who, going back to her again, I love her character. for a variety of reasons. But anyways, and then that leads into immediately my next note. I did really love Oichi and Keihatsu's conversation regarding that situation after the fact.
Yeah.
And I have a couple of other notes here, but I didn't know if I should
Go
ask
ahead.
if you had anything. I love the characterization of, because it's not just her crying, because like it's even like the hiccups with her crying.
Yeah.
Which, ironically enough, I don't know how to feel about Keihatsu's laughter at it, because I do recognize that's a moment of levity.
Yeah.
But as somebody who, I don't cry a lot. I genuinely don't. I am a very subdued emotional person.
Yes.
When I do, there's a good chance that there will be hiccups, and I don't know. Maybe it's I don't know. I see what you were doing there.
He's not laughing.
It's not laughing at her. It's laughing at the.
And like you can see like he feels bad that he's laughing. But
Yeah, no, I get
it's one
that.
of those. Like, have you ever been in so much pain that you can't help but laugh?
If I'm being perfectly honest, I want to say no.
Okay, because I have. Like you'll find there's been a couple times where like I'm just in so much pain that I just start laughing at how ridiculous I feel and then like how ridiculous the situation is that got me into that.
Okay.
So it's kind of one of the like, and again he feels bad and like it's hurting him to laugh and he wants to stop, but it is his body's automatic response to this incredible stress that he's been put under.
Yeah. No, I get that, and that's why I said like I don't know how I feel about it, because I see what you're doing, and I can't say that I like it, but I can't say that I dislike it either. It's just what
It's just what it is, yeah.
It's just what it is, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and just to close out my notes, I just thought, again, it was a very long chapter. Well, granted, I say it's very long because I was reading it double-spaced, but it was still fun. I still, overall, really liked it.
Yeah, you didn't feel like
so,
like what I'm getting from you is that you didn't feel like you just like kind of sat and like glazed over for like.
There were moments
pages.
where I felt like maybe I did glaze over and I had to reread the sentence or two, but that's just because I was also listening to not only the Pokemon Legends Arceus music, but also Sonic and the Black Knight music, because I've been really reinvesting in that game for some odd, arbitrary reason, but B, it also works musically speaking because it's also like a feudal setting, not necessarily Japanese, more European, but it's just, I don't know, I like it.
Okay.
But
Alrighty.
But yeah, no, so overall it was a very good chapter. I really enjoyed reading both of them.
Cool. I'm glad you enjoyed reading it. Honey,
Yeah, no,
do you have any closing thoughts about the chapter?
No, sorry. I was in and out a lot because our dogs were being very needy today.
Sure, yeah. No, I mean, I don't want to come across as like excluding you or like saying or anything like that.
No, you're good. No, it was a good conversation, so I was just kind of hanging out and listening.
Okay.
But no, I mean, I really liked that little twist that it's like, oh no, he wasn't actually going to kill them. Like,
I feel like it has to be very carefully played when you do that, and like it's something you can only do once.
Yeah.
Because if you get known for like pulling the like if he becomes known for pulling the psych card, you know, nobody's gonna take him at his word. I felt like I honestly debated with myself whether or not to use this as something that he does later on down the line, but I was like, no, I wanted to show the merciful king.
Yeah, I liked
early on.
I liked the character.
You could also. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Go ahead.
I liked
Sorry.
the character development that we got.
Okay. Like where like I also liked that I gave Oichi kind of a reason to doubt him that was invalidated, and not like she's starting to learn like he really is a good guy.
Sure. You could also do like a total sort of Davy Jones situation where like you offer them, but then like also there's that one person like, don't listen to him, and he's like, do you not fear death? I'll take my chances, sir. To the depths. Strong.
Yep.
And then I mean I say that facetiously, but at the same time that could still be like a like it's not unheard of, not obviously not in modern times, but like in more like of a feudal kind of like war-torn setting, I suppose, for lack of a better phrase. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
all right.
Yeah,
well,
no, so it was overall very enjoyable.
I'm glad you're enjoying this story so far.
Yeah, no, it gives me something to do while I write my own Ace Attorney story, which is honestly, it's going better than I thought it would.
Awesome.
So I have that going for
I'm
me.
glad to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm working on the sketch. I'm working on it.
Yeah, no, thanks again for that. I'm hoping to finish the See, here's the thing. The way that it's, I know what I want. I'm still writing the actual, because like the way that it's set up is that there's like a bunch of different cases and like a bunch of different mysteries and then arguments and back and forth about what actually happened, and that takes most like the deductive thing out of like traditional detective stories.
Yeah.
But I know what I want and I know the twist, but it's just I'm trying to write it while also getting down the specifics, which is an interesting challenge in and of itself, and also just trying to get to that point, because I do like the characters that I'm writing, but it's also hard because, you know, I don't want to seem boring.
In order for that moment to be as good as you, in order for that moment to be received as well as you enjoy it, you have to know how to build up to it. And
exactly, and you did that a lot in like your own story with Pokemon Warpath, especially like in the past 2 chapters. But I'm not posting anything of the story until I have the first case finished, because the way that's structured, the way that like an Ace Attorney game is typically structured, for those who don't know, for you who don't know, is that it's kind of like episodic, how like there's like generally 4 to 5 cases per game that you play through. And they generally have some kind of interconnected story. Okay. And that's what I'm trying to do right now. And the first one is like a lot more like kind of like a standard introductory case, like it's gonna take place and have some ideas and themes that are very important later on down the line. But I want to get some kind of like complete story, even if it's just like say episode 1, complete in like maybe like 5 or 6 chapters or so. So hoping that I can write that and then get some, I don't know, maybe I'll even like ask if like, hey, who wants to like just do a quick podcast with me? I don't know.
I would be absolutely down for that.
Oh, awesome. Then yeah, it gives me a motivation to continue writing it.
There you go.
You've got this, dude.
You got this.
Thanks.
You can do this.
Yeah, thanks. But yeah, no, I loved reading your thing, and I'm very excited for more, and I will hopefully be able to read more of Your Hero Academia. But like I've said before, I'm still gonna read it. I'm still gonna try to find time, but I am a lot more burnt out from that.
Yeah, I understand what you have to allocate your time into what you want to invest it.
Yeah,
I understand that.
No, but still, this is great, man. I always love doing this, and I love talking.
We always enjoy having you on the podcast.
Well, that's great to hear.
Well, I don't know if the mic's picking it up, but the pug says no more.
All right, gotta listen to the pug then.
All right,
thank you, Silver.
Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. It's been a blast. Thank you.
All right, everybody. We'll catch you later.
Have a good one.
Me
Bye.
too. Bye.